Good evening, everyone. I will call this regular Board of Director meeting to order on Tuesday, April 28th, 2026. Thank you to those attending in person, joining us by Zoom, and staying engaged by watching our recording at a later time. The public is reminded that if they wish to speak during community comment, they will need to fill out a speaker form located in the back of the room on the table to my left. The form should be turned in to our board secretary, Kim Coven, seated at the end of the table, also on my left. Comments will take place during the designated community comment portion of our agenda. At this time, I want to take a moment to introduce those seated at the table with me. To my right, we have Superintendent Degner, Directors Horn Frazier, Eastham, and Williams. To my left, we have Vice President Abraham, Directors Finch and Lingo, and Board Secretary Coven. And now we'll move on to our agenda for tonight, and the first item is approval for tonight's agenda. Is there a motion?
Move approval of the agenda.
Second.
Board Secretary Coven, ready to vote?
Online voting is open.
I'm a yes vote. It didn't pop up for me.
Thank you. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you. Next up is our education showcase, and tonight we have the Southeast Middle School Choir with us, and I will turn it over to you for a formal introduction. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, school board, district admin, fellow faculty and staff, and community members. My name is Maddie Madsen, and I'm one of the band directors at Southeast Middle School. Our principal, Mrs. Michelle Cook, has asked our music team to come tif and share about the successes of our students achieve at Southeast. We're very thankful for this opportunity. Someone could click to the next slide. Oh, sorry, or if I could do it, I don't know where to. Perfect. Sorry, guys.
No, you're fine.
There you go. Love it. Thank you. So on this first slide, you will read about some accomplishments that we are very proud of at Southeast. I won't take the time to read all of them to you, but it's truly an amazing list. Some are easily seen, like the awards and trophies students have won, and other accomplishments lend themselves more to the culture and climate of our music department. Both are aspects we are extremely proud of. We know these accomplishments do not come without hard work, sacrifice, and dedication from a myriad of avenues. These accomplishments are a team effort. Here are some of the supports we received to help our students be successful. To start at the top, we received quite a lot of support, mainly through funding from the district and Music Auxiliary, our district-wide booster organization run by dedicated parents and guardians of our students. Whether it's the Little Idea Grant, which we have been awarded multiple times, purchasing instruments for our students on free and reduced lunch plans, or busing our students to their events, we could not have our program function without the backing of the district. Going down one level to our building admin, we would be remiss if we did not give a huge shout out to our amazing administration at Southeast. These four, Ms. Michelle Cook, Mr. Sean Baylor, Ms. Allison DeVries, and Ms. Emily Dvorak, have been nothing but wonderful in their care and encouragement of our music classes. They work the schedule to make it possible for us to teach over 20 sections of music each quarter. This has led to almost 80% of our student population at Southeast is involved in music, and 40% of that group is involved in more than one musical class. We know that this is a luxury at our school, and it's all due to our administration caring about the whole child and valuing their co-curricular classes. The support modeled by our administration is reflected in how our staff views our musical ensembles and classes. This is truly a school that is all in for all kids, whether it's attending concerts, being gracious with our lesson schedule, or talking with kids about their experiences in music. I really want to highlight our PE staff and sports coaches. Time and time again, they have helped students be both successful in music and sports. They've changed meets so kids can perform in both their concerts and make their events. A lot of kids up there right now are also in track, and they were welcome to come to this. They let us invade their spaces when City High had some renovations and we had to have concerts in the gym this year. And they work with schedules for morning practices. They always support kids being involved in everything, which is a huge message to share with our young students. Our team, if I could be so bold, is pretty amazing as well. These are all the music teachers that we have at Southeast. Not only do we work really well together, but we're truly a team that loves each other. We help out at each other's concerts every trimester. We share kids in rehearsals. We bounce ideas off one another for rehearsal strategies and celebrate each other's wins. Each lunch period we have is a collaborative team meeting for us. Our willingness to help each other means that students really get the expertise of 7 teachers in each rehearsal. This team knows the goal is to have kids loving music and their musical experiences, so we work together to do whatever is needed to achieve that goal. So to review, after hearing all of the encouragement, care, and backing that we get, it's no surprise that we have a very successful music program at Southeast. The students are set up well to accomplish whatever goals they set out to achieve. Our kids are using music to develop into well-rounded learners who understand the importance of dedication, perseverance, and pushing oneself to go beyond complacency. I couldn't be happier that I get to teach these awesome musicians. Speaking of these awesome musicians, we have some here tonight that are gonna play for you. They all chose to be here and work together in this first ever band, choir, orchestra collaboration. So thank you so much for coming out to listen to us. This is Loch Lomond.
Guys so much. That was absolutely beautiful. Let's give them another round of applause. It's always nice to see the developing talent coming from our middle schools up to our high school buildings. So can't wait to see them on the bigger stage. Thank you again. Next up is community comment. Thank you for your interest in the Iowa City Community School District and for your willingness to share your comments. You are reminded to give your name, address, and topic on which you plan to speak about. During community comment, persons may speak to the board about topics relevant to the district. Speakers who make comments are reminded that they are responsible for their own statements and may be subject to legal action for those which include hate speech and that are threatening, harassing, or defamatory in nature. It is expected that speakers will address the board and each other with civility and abide by the stated time limits. All community comment directed at non-agenda and agenda items will take place at the beginning of the meeting and will be limited to 4 minutes per speaker and 5 minutes for speakers who require the assistance of an interpreter. Speakers' time limit will be displayed on the iPad located on the ledge in front of Board Secretary Ms. Colvin, and an alarm will sound once the speaker's time has expired. The initial community comment period will be limited to an hour, and remaining community comment, to the extent necessary, will take place at the end of the meeting. The board will not engage in any discussion during public comment. The role of the board during this time is to listen. Any individual who does not abide by these rules or otherwise disrupts the meeting may be asked to leave and/or referred to law enforcement. Our first speaker of the night will be Kim Christensen.
Hi there. Good evening. My name is Kim Christensen. I live in Coralville. I'm here to speak about the PFM presentation and the funding for the new pool. It is good news the district will not need to borrow $25 million. This evening, I'm expecting PFM will outline the specific changes from April 1st to now, as I have several questions. The interim CFO states the 26 bank reconciliations are still pending. Are they now complete? Does the interim CFO have confidence that the district has reliable financial data to make any financial decisions? What accounts for the extra $4.8 million in other general fund revenues between January through March, and why did March's expenditures drop by $1.8 million? On April 1st, PFM stated insurance interfund loan will be repaid with the $25 million warrant in June, but now recommends waiting until September. Why wasn't this considered earlier? Where are the projections after June 30th where the insurance fund loan will be or how it will be paid off? Additionally, concerns persist regarding the current business office and accounting personnel. Aside from hiring a CFO, which have been accomplished in 2023, no other staff changes have occurred. The corrective action plan for the fiscal year 23 audit submitted to the SBRC was not implemented. The audit firm is assisting in training staff. Account receivables have not aged since 2022. These are significant issues that impact the trust of the district's financial competency. This brings me to discuss the Coralville Pool project. SAVE funds are committed until 2038, and PEPL is already stretched thin. PFM suggests limiting general fund expenses not to exceed 2% over the next 3 to 5 years. On top of $14 million investment, the district will also have to cover 1/3 of operating costs as they do now. Covering 1/3 of the cost for 2 competition pools would be a significant financial burden. However, our current pool may be the worst in our conference, but that hasn't stopped the boys swim team from winning 2 state championships under Coach Butler. I've spent many hours in the Coralville pool. The facility is uncomfortably hot and smells strongly of chlorine, conditions so harsh that my mother-in-law couldn't stay for the entire meet. Meanwhile, schools like Dubuque and Lynmar have their own modern pools. Is there a need for a new pool? Absolutely. However, it is disheartening to see that because the district has been financially irresponsible for so long and there has been no accountability. Students will miss out on opportunities and the best, most well-rounded educations possible. As a swim mom whose son and daughter both swam for West High, I'd like to share a bit about the Trojan Bolts swim team. Both boys and girls teams are resilient, close-knit, loyal, and hardworking. During COVID, when all pools were closed, some bought wetsuits so they could train in Lake McBride. Personally, I don't think splitting the teams is necessary. These swimmers train together in club and enjoy swimming as one group. 2 competition pools are not the right answer. Maybe 1 larger pool to reduce costs. To get on the swim team, all it requires is for you can get to the one end of the pool to the other. The team is pretty much open to everyone. That's equity. Now it's time for creative out-of-the-box solutions. This one is on you. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we will have Paul Ressler.
Good evening, board, and pretty awesome to see Southeast music in action as I get to see it every day while I'm at Southeast. I'm here to urge the board to maintain our current cell phone policy for the middle school while shifting our attention to Chromebook usage instead. As a board member who supported and was one of the members who passed the one-to-one Chromebook initiative, I believed it was right move at the time, but after years of implementation, I think it's clear that if we can remain one-to-one when truly needed, but we don't need our students on devices 100% of the day. Chromebooks should be available as tools used intentionally, not consistently. On cell phones, I think a strict bell-to-bell ban would be an overreaction. It removes flexibility, signals distrust in our students and staff, and risks creating unnecessary tension and inequities. Research and experience show that what matters most is consistent, fair enforcement of clear expectations. That approach teaches responsibility and better prepares our students for the real world. I believe our current policy at Southeast, and the same across all the secondary schools, is working. We set the same clear expectations for every student and enforce them consistently. As one of the people on the front line of enforcing that, it's whether a teacher calls for assistance or we spot a phone in the hallway during instructional time, we follow through. Shout out to Mr. J, Ms. Payton, and Mr. Teo at our school for their strong teamwork on this as well. Students have very limited time during the day, free time during the day, roughly 4 minutes between classes and 30 minutes at lunch. That's, if you add it up, about an hour a day. No students do I see in school are on their phones during that amount of time. One, our school is very packed, and to get from spot to spot, you've got to be on a hustle. And that 30 minutes of lunch is broken down into getting through the lunch line and eating. So they're not always on their phone. I'm in every lunch. Ms. DeVore, I can tell you that in the back. So I see 1,300 students come through the lunch every day. The dramatic reduction in in-school days, social media, and group chat drama has dropped, and we've seen that's been proven with the policy's effectiveness. Most of that conflict, although it still happens, originates outside of school and then only spills over when students interact face-to-face and usually are encouraged by other peers to do something about whatever they were chatting about that previous day or night. Our electronic hall pass system that we use, which is part of our HRS Level 1 work for safety, has also improved safety and efficiency. One of the parts of that, students can scan in and out of school using their ID, their Chromebook, or their phone via a photo of their ID or accessing Infinite Campus. And we actually encourage students to take a picture of the ID because that's more lost than most overdue library books by students. They don't seem to be able to keep hold of their student ID very long. This year alone, we've had over 11,000 scans at our attendance window. That's alone, if you take half of those, that's thousands of paper passes that Ms. Tanya doesn't have to write every day. Not having those paper passes reduces waste, saves from printing, and saves us money, which I think we're all looking for now these days, right? During lunch, a quick ID scan keeps the line moving smoothly for roughly the 400 students for each lunch period that we have going through the lines. Removing an easy digital access will slow those operations and create some new headaches. 2 things can be true. Phones can carry risk, and our current policy, when fairly and consistently enforced, mitigates those risks without disproportionate discipline and heightened parental anxiety over communication. So I would just, again, like to say that the policy we have now is working. And again, I think we should shift to the Chromebook usage now. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we will have Angie Rogers.
My name is Angie Rogers and I live in Coralville. I'm here tonight to speak about the most recent PFM analysis of district finances. Over the past 3 years, district leadership has failed to meet basic standards of financial oversight, transparency, and accountability. Those failures are the reason we are here tonight, trying to reconcile wildly different financial positions presented just weeks apart. I have several comments about the PFM slide deck, and I will highlight 4 of them. I would expect that each board member also has several questions to ask because the latest financial analysis leaves out critical detail. First, PFM should provide a written reconciliation of every change between April 1st and April 28th. Changes in the beginning cash balance, revenue forecasts, expense forecasts, interfund loan timing, save obligations, capital encumbrances, any other adjustments, and the revised borrowing need. Right now, the board and the public are expected to simply accept a dramatic shift from needing $25 to $35 million in borrowing to needing none without being shown what has happened. That's not transparency. Second, the reported $6.593 million positive variance is presented without meaningful explanation. The board should demand a clear breakdown of the revenue and expenditure changes behind that number. Are these ongoing revenues or one-time increases? Are lower expenditures true savings, delayed payments, or timing shifts? Given the recent history, assumptions cannot go unchallenged. Third, PMF fails to give general fund monthly cash flow projections past June 2026. That's 2 months from now. The board needs to see cash flow well beyond June of 2026 to fully understand and accurately assess the district's financial health. Fourth, I'm concerned about the tone of PFM's presentation. PFM's role is not to rebuild trust in district leadership. Its role is to provide objective, independent financial analysis. Moving from recommending $25 to $35 million in borrowing to recommending none in less than 30 days is not a minor adjustment. It is a fundamental reversal. The board and the community deserve a clear explanation of what changed. Better data, different assumptions, timing decisions, or prior analytical error. Finally, I want to be very clear. The sudden shift in financial outlook should not be used to excuse the failures of district leadership over the past 3 years. Those failures created instability, eroded public trust, impacted our building staff and students, and put this district in a position where even basic financial facts are being questioned today. If this board does not hold district leadership accountable, it signals that failure to meet basic job expectations at the highest levels carries no consequences. This has broader implications for the entire district going forward. How can staff be held accountable for failing to meet those same expectations if district leadership is not held to them? Until there's full transparency and accountability at the district leadership level, improved projections alone do not resolve the underlying problem. I urge you to demand the details and documentation necessary to fully understand the district's financial position. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we will have Joe Yoner.
Hello, President Malone, directors. My name is Joe Yoner, Iowa City resident, graduate of Southeast City High, proud parent of a Hoover 4th grader and a Southeast 8th grader who is here playing today. Her name's Millie. She will be really embarrassed that I mentioned that to you all. I recognize that the responsibilities of your position are heavy, even in good times, and in some ways these are not good times. I appreciate that. I also appreciate that there is a great deal you cannot say in this room. Personnel matters, advice of counsel, those are real constraints, and I'm not asking you to breach any of them. But I appreciate there are different kinds of silence. There is silence that law and prudence require. I understand that space. I can live with that. And there is a silence that leaves parents, teachers, students, taxpayers wondering whether the people in charge see what they see. That's the one I struggle with because it does not provide the assurance we need to hear, and more importantly, it does not provide the plan we need to hear. The community has been told in various forms that things are being managed and processes are being put in place. All of that may be true. I'm confident that I do not have access to all of the information, but management language is not solution language. There is a plain word I'm listening for, and that word is crisis. Using the plain word matters. It tells parents, students, staff, and taxpayers that the people in this room see what we see, they understand the situation. And here is part of what I see. The facilities master plan resolution Directors Lingo and Finch have brought forward tonight is an example of the right kind of discussion. It does not breach any confidence. It does not litigate personnel matters in public. What it does do is say plainly that capital projects should pause pending a financial review, that the pause should remain until the board determines the district has achieved financial stability, and that financial advisors need to be involved in the process. Let's take a beat here. The resolution takes the pause on projects and brings it expressly within the board's control with input from financial advisors. This move matters. This move recognizes that it cannot be business as usual, even with revised projections, that we cannot have the administration on its own looking for pathways to fund projects. This move recognizes the moment for what it is. I see two members asking hard questions, digging into this and attempting to build a solution. I do not hear much from 4 directors, and 1 director appears unwilling to use the word crisis. I hope all of you use the proposed resolution as an opportunity to break the silence. And this crisis aside, whatever's happening in the central office, this district is full of people that do extraordinary work. The student journalists at West High recently published a clear-eyed editorial on the financial crisis. They did not soft pedal, they did not hedge. Those students are the product of solid teaching. That is who your students are. That's who your teachers are teaching, and that's the standard we are asking you all to meet. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we'll have Emily Hulie.
Good evening. My name is Emily Hulie, and I'm a former teacher in the district, a current parent of 2 students who attend our wonderful neighborhood school, Twain Elementary. As I begin, I want to acknowledge the tensions that have been brought to this room week after week. One strategy that I teach my kids and taught my students is to stop and take a deep breath. It does wonders for your nervous system. So I encourage everyone here and listening to pause and take a deep breath. As I look around this room, I recognize signs of stress in a tightness around eyes. I see anger in downturned mouths and furrowed brows, and I hear frustration in the voices that have spoken over the last weeks and months. But through all of that, what I want to recognize in all of you is your humanity. You are humans with complex feelings responding to other humans with complex feelings. The ability to recognize another's humanity, while innate in most of us, must be intentionally nurtured in order to thrive. Our human ability to read another person's emotions develops over years of looking into each other's faces and learning to understand what different expressions mean. Recognizing humanity comes from years of hearing another human's voice and understanding the difference between anger and frustration or elation and relief. Over the course of our human lives, we will look into anywhere from 50,000 to 3 million faces. And it is the seeing and reading of these human faces that help us to maintain our humanity. EdTech and Big Tech are trying to take that away. Tech creators make products that capture our attention so completely that we can hardly tear our eyes away from a screen and look into the eyes of our friends, our classmates, our teachers, or fellow parents at school pickup. When we give our attention to a screen for hours on end, we are slowly giving away our humanity. When our children are so addicted to a screen and the images that flash across them that they would rather stay inside than be outside on a beautiful spring day, their humanity is slowly being taken from them. They become disconnected from this world that will only survive if we can reclaim our humanity. I know that in any given moment, a governing and decision-making body like you all does the best it can with the information that it has. But things change, information is gained, research is conducted, And we learn that the decision we made 2, 5, 10 years ago does not hold today. So we adapt because as humans, that is something we're very good at. We gather new information, and again, we make the best decision that we can in this moment. Please, read the growing research being done on the effects of ed tech on our children. Talk to mental health professionals. Listen to the interviews with leading researchers in these areas. Reach out to local law enforcement and gather information. And then, with thoughtfulness and great care, make the decision that will help our children reclaim and nurture their humanity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, we will have Riley Einan Lynch, and my apologies if I mispronounced your hyphenated last name. Please correct me.
Hi, everyone. I'm Riley Einan Lynch. I live in the Longfellow neighborhood of Iowa City. I was a high school teacher and middle school youth leader for 12 years. And I started, sorry, I didn't expect to be crying already. I started an ed tech company called Pear Deck. It was better branding than the guttural growl. Pear Deck, much nicer brand. And it was a teaching tool that grew to millions of students across the country. And I'm here to share a perspective I think you probably almost never get, and most school districts or school boards wouldn't get, which is an insider from the ed tech field who built ed tech. I have one story for you, but I would really, if you can somehow ask me for more information later at a time where it works with the order of operations, I would really be happy to share more. I have a decade of experience on the inside as one of the only teachers in a field of scientists and computer programmers working to engage kids. My story is about the South by Southwest Tech Conference. Any extra time for crying or anything? No, I'm just kidding. I attended a workshop called The Science of Addiction, Creating Habit-Forming Apps. And I sat with, well, I'm gonna skip this part. Basically, I sat with a bunch of people, almost none of whom had my teaching experience or goals, learning how to get people to use their apps regardless of if they helped them. And so, now I'm really gonna lose it because thank you. My son who goes to Southeast, they get assigned to lunch tables, and every so often he says, oh, he got a phone table. And that means the kids at that table are on their phones, basically, to him. And we've heard I know that my colleagues in the tech industry serve up examples like, that give you reasons to satisfy your addiction for technology. Like, all these screens are better for the environment than a tree plantation. Or, we heard tonight about teaching kids personal responsibility. And I just want you to picture these phone tables, not as those kids struggling with personal responsibility on their own, but literally with a team of programmers and scientists connected to them, behind them, trying to get, using science of brain chemistry to keep them on the phones and to to think that that's the pedagogically correct way to teach responsibility is really irresponsibly naive about the people on the other side of the screens. So I know my time is up, and I had a lot of great things to say, but if I can help, I think not many people have access to folks like me, and I have like many, many stories and specific techniques used to make you think phones are a good idea. I hope you get rid of them at the middle schools in social time.
Thank you. Next up, we'll have Laura Westermeyer.
My name is Laura Westmeyer, and I live in Iowa City. I'm speaking tonight regarding concerns I have with the PFM presentation and the district's payroll. I want to begin by emphasizing that there are critical details missing from the PFM presentation to the ICCSD board. Without those details, you cannot meet your fiduciary duty to act in the best interest of the district and its stakeholders. You cannot responsibly act on an analysis that is incomplete. First, this updated PFM analysis should not be viewed as a positive reflection on performance. It is a limited financial snapshot with significant limitations. Over the past 3 years, district officers have demonstrated repeated failures. These include an unlawful $10 million interfund transfer, failures in hiring and supervising a CFO, and a lack of basic financial controls. Accounts were not balanced, taxes were not paid on time, audits were not filed on time. The district lost its credit rating. Second, there must be a clarity on who is working with PFM, who is representing ICCSD in these discussions. Is PFM working with the interim CFO, and what role has the incoming CFO played? We are given conflicting information. We are told the new CFO does not officially begin until May 13th, yet the PFM presentation states she is already integrated and supportive of this financial plan. Those statements are not consistent, and we deserve a clear answer. Third, the scope of the analysis is too narrow. PFM is presenting a one-year cash flow through June of 26, approximately 2 months from now. You cannot make informed decisions with this single-year snapshot. Where are the multi-year projections referenced in the April 1st presentation? Where is the analysis showing how decisions in the general fund impact other funds? PEPL, SAVE, the Health Insurance Fund, and the Student Activity Fund. These funds do not operate in isolation. Without understanding how they interact over time, the board is being asked to act without a complete financial picture, and that is not acceptable governance. I urge you to demand the missing details and insist on a complete, transparent, multi-year financial analysis. Right now, you are asked to accept an analysis that lacks critical detail, and if you do, you are putting this district at risk. Finally, payroll. In 2023, serious deficiencies in financial reporting and administrative oversight led the state to require a formal corrective action plan. This was not a minor issue. It was a clear acknowledgement that the district leaders had failed. That plan required a written assurance from our district leaders. We, the officers of ICCSD, assure that we will implement the procedures as outlined and will file all future CAR, SES, and ATR reports as required by the Department of Education in the manner and by the dates prescribed. We further stipulate that we understand the implications of late filing to our district. This was a commitment to accountability way back in 2023. And yet, here we are again. If the officers who accepted responsibility in 2023 for both their own performance and their failure to adequately supervise are not held accountable after repeated breakdowns, then we set a dangerous precedent. When we tolerate repeated failures at the highest level without consequence, we lower the standards of acceptable performance across the district. Under those conditions, how do you justify holding any employee accountable? On April 1st, PFM reported an average monthly payroll of over $15.6 million. The district cannot afford to move into the fall 2026 without taking action, particularly the statutory deadlines for administrative reductions approaching. The reality is simple. Payroll costs are too high. The board needs to end the contracts for our officers now for being unreliable, dishonest, irresponsible, and untrustworthy for the past 3 years. Accountability must be consistent, and it must start at the top. Our students and educators deserve leaders who fulfill their responsibilities. No more settling for the worst leaders our state has to offer.
Thank you. Next up, we will have Karen Fox.
My name is Karen Fox, and I live in Iowa City. Good evening. I have lived in Iowa City for 48 years, and I'm the proud wife of Charles Eastham. I'm a member of the Black Voices Project, where I go to listen. My words are from my own heart and mind. I'm not here to represent any organization or group. Our 3 children grew up in Iowa City. They attended schools in the district from kindergarten through graduation. I have always been happy with and proud of the school system. I'm here to talk about the current financial challenges and how much I appreciate the way that the board and the superintendent have behaved. When you learned of the situation, you acted promptly to address it. You are considering changes to charter to improve the board's knowledge of the finances of the district. You have and are continuing to make policy changes, emphasizing the board's role in managing the budget. You have brought an experienced interim CFO to guide you. You have hired a new permanent CFO who is working with the interim to learn from her the breadth of what is going on. You know what questions to ask to ensure that this never happens again. You have made yourselves available to the Black Voices Project and other community organizations and individuals to explain what has happened and how you're dealing with it. You've also made yourselves available to the community to answer tough questions and talk about how this impacts our students, schools, and community to anyone who wants to know. I hope that more community organizations and individuals will open their doors to you so that they can learn directly from you what is happening. The integrity you have shown is a good reason to listen to you. There are people in our community who believe we should let the superintendent and all of the board members go. To me, this is no solution at all. It's backwards. Our superintendent and the board have been honest and have acted with integrity. No one embezzled money. No one swept it under the rug. No one has more reason or inspiration to solve this problem than the people in front of us now. We voted in the members of this board because you have great vision for our schools. You've made outstanding changes that have supported all of our students. There are challenges to the educational system today. I want you to be the ones addressing it. Superintendent Denger, council member, board member Horn Frazier, Eastham, Williams, Malone, Abraham, and Finch. Sorry, I don't know you all by sight. Thank you for your service. Your real job is to make sure that our kids get a great education. You are here to remove barriers to that education, the challenges to ability, race, religion, economic status, gender and gender identity, and more. You've been working hard to remove those barriers, and I commend your efforts. This is what I want you, our elected officials and excellent superintendent, to focus on, the excellence. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up, we'll have John Fogerty.
Give me a second, my notes disappeared. All right, well, I'm gonna wing it. So John Fogerty, kid at Shimmick, West High grad, Coralville Central, Northwest, even a half semester in kindergarten at Horn. I've been listening to Too Big to Fail about the 2008 financial crisis, book on tape. Listening to them talk about AIG in March of 2008. There was a lot that reminded me of our current situation. It's insurance, it's different, but still, the CEO restated earnings from a couple months past, got fired. And they had there was a confidence issue because they were running out of cash. There was a liquidity issue. And it just kept striking notes of like, these are the issues I feel we are facing just in a school district. And as I've told you, I'm board president of works with policy governance and had to remove our chief executive for restating earnings, which I didn't share, but that's what triggered that probationary period. We're 3 months behind on fiscal audit, or 3 years behind on fiscal audits. really, once we got 2 months behind, there should have been probationary action. That should have been enough right there for performance improvement plan. 3 years behind now means we are not even to the finding out phase of our situation. So crisis, yes, probably could be too nice. Maybe we won't find much worse than what we already know, but we don't know that. Again, not to the finding out phase. We have a culture of incompetence and failure in the administration. And I've urged you that you need to make a change. We have a May 15th deadline by which we're legally bound to stick with this administration. 19 days. This was the job you were elected for. No one runs for school board for the glamour, and no one thinks we're gonna have to do this big change in the administration, but it is in the job description. We are at that point. We are past the point. I have a humble MBA. I could do a modestly better job for half the price, and I'm sure there's 100 men and women in the corridor who could do at least that same work for the district. This is really a failure of simple systems, of bookkeeping, of calling the board president when we have to make a transfer between one fund and another so that we can pay our teachers. Very simple things. I know it's more complicated on the day-to-day and the month-to-month, but the failures really come down to very basic tasks and systems that clearly are not there. And so when I look at it, it's nothing but incompetence and failure, because phone calls are easy to say, hey, I need it to be on the next agenda to transfer $10 million so we can pay our teachers, and not hide it for 5 months. So you've got 19 days to make this change. Again, it is in your job description, amongst other things. And if you don't take action, there is going to be a confidence issue with the board in the community. And you are going to inhabit that culture of failure and incompetence. And it's going to trickle down to the frontline folks who really make the difference for our children. I said a couple meetings ago, this building sets the tone, really, is the job, and the big stuff.
Thank you.
Don't set the tone of failure and competence.
Thank you. Next up, we'll have Jenny Struthers.
Hi, I'm Jenny Struthers, and I live in Coralville, and I have one student at West High and one that is a recent graduate of the district. I would like to speak tonight also about the PFM financials that are coming out. I want to echo the sentiments that have been brought up by other speakers. I don't think there was enough data in the presentation. Hopefully that will come out tonight. So hopefully, I know we're still going to get the presentation, so hopefully we'll get some. So some of my comments are just kind of made on assumptions. So, but basically I have reviewed this presentation, and at first impression, it seems to be some really good news. But on review, I think there's some specific questions that need to be raised, and we need to just step back and actually look at our actual financial picture and not just look at this of like, oh, wow, we're good now. It's great that we can make the bond payment without getting some type of loan. But we also have to look at where are we after we make the payment. Specifically, I'm worried about how thin our UAB will become. To reiterate, I looked over this presentation many times, and what all I see in this, and people have talked about it, only goes through June, is I don't think it's giving us a forecast for what's going to happen in the future and a long plan. It's how to fix a problem right now, how to put out the current fire that's right in front of us. So I'm taking it as that, but I think there's some questions. Basically, I am worried about the UAB. Have we literally scraped together all the free cash we have to make this payment? I know that we have 2 pieces of real estate that have been sold, or at least are in the works of being sold. I don't know if that's part of the revenue that's reported, and if not, then maybe that can go into padding our UAB, because like there's a new change in law that it can go into the general fund. So that's all great. Generally, it still is kind of not a great thing, because generally you'd want to take that sale of property and you'd want to put it toward further capital projects. It's not a best practices, but it does provide us a solution now. So that's good. It does help us with this fire, but it's still not a great thing. Not ideal. So basically, I want to just address that, is that this is good news that we don't have to, that since we don't have any loans, it will put this fire out, but it doesn't mean that we're in the clear. Second of all, the decrease in expenditures, hopefully we can get some more information on that tonight. It's great that we have found some money. I know there's been tightening of expenses, but there's still an elephant in the room with this. I've spoken with administrators, teachers, students, and even custodial staff that have all seen some effects on the budget crisis in their building. But the question remains, where have the cuts been at central administration? I have not heard of the top positions giving up any of their monthly allowances, double retirement accounts, reduction in salary, and I'm not counting a salary freeze. Have any CFI positions been eliminated? I've heard of some transfers, but I have not heard of any eliminations of positions yet. And maybe these are things we're working on, but I think the public needs to know. Overall, this report shows positive news for the immediate future, but there's still a lot of problems going forward, and we just need to be conscious of that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next on our agenda, we will have public hearings. And the first public hearing is for the 2026-27 certified budget. Vice President Abraham.
Now is the time and place for the public hearing on the district's proposed fiscal year 2027 certified budget. Notice of public hearing was published in the Iowa City Press-Citizen on April 15th, 2026. Are there any comments from the board? Are there any comments from the public?
We will close that public hearing and call for the next public hearing of the conveyance of an interest in real property.
Now is the time and place for the public hearing on the conveyance of an interest in real property. A parcel of land is locally known as 1725 North Dodge Street, Iowa City, Iowa. The Board of Directors set the date for this public hearing on April 14th, 2026. Notice of the public hearing was published in the Iowa City Press-Citizen on April 15th, 2026. Are there any questions from the board? Are there any questions from the public?
And that, I'll close that public hearing, and that concludes our public hearing. Before we get to tonight's consent agenda, did any directors who reviewed the bills this cycle have any questions or comments?
Actually, I did, and I'm sorry I didn't put this in a director inquiry, but it was a constituent that reached out to me just before the meeting with a question regarding the payment to Andale Cantina for the AI Summit lunch that was $2,250. So it came from the general fund, so I just wondered if it was just funneled through the general fund through another source. Thought I'd throw that out there for you.
One of you guys got that?
Yeah, that was through a Digital Promise grant, so it just flowed through and then we were reimbursed on the other end. Yep,
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My only comment, which I made earlier at P&G, is that the increased detail on the P-card purchases was really appreciated. I think that makes things a lot more clear. So thank you for whoever's responsible for making that happen.
Any others? All right. Are there any items that directors would like to pull from tonight's consent agenda? Hearing none, is there a motion for tonight's consent agenda?
Motion to approve the consent agenda?
Second.
Board Secretary Coven, ready to vote?
Online voting is open.
I'm a yea vote, Kim.
Thank you, Director Finch. All votes have been cast, and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you. Next up, we will have a committee report from the Education Committee Chair, Director Horn Fraser.
Thank you. We met last week for the Education Committee and had two main agenda items. One, the first one was looking at the charter for the committee because sort of similar to the Financial Oversight Committee, we've been taking a close look at the charters and noticing, in the case of the Education Committee, that there were differences between what's current practice and what is in the charter, and so it was a good opportunity to look at kind of how that's evolved over the past several years since the committee was first essentially formulated, I guess you could say, and so we had a really good discussion about how we can bring the charter and the committee function into alignment and do so in a way that is most helpful to the district and the board. And so over the next few weeks, we'll be looking at revising the charter to clarify staff membership in that committee representing the elementary, middle, and high school levels, and exploring the possibility of including some other community members, perhaps from the University in Kirkwood and Grantwood AEA, to provide some perspective from their respective areas of expertise. And then also we talked about using the year's curriculum review as sort of a theme for focusing our work of that committee. Like next year, we're looking at literacy and putting the work of that committee under that umbrella as we see programs at work in the schools and talk here about different aspects of the curriculum. So I'm excited about that direction. We'll keep working on it and should have something. That committee will not be meeting again until, I think, August, so we have a little bit of time to put it all together. Did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to commend you for the ideas you brought to the Education Committee. I think we had a really good discussion, and I really appreciated the more focused direction, and yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Oh, did you have a?
No, go ahead.
I just want, one other topic from that committee meeting was looking at the surveys. One has already gone out and the other one will be soon on phone policy and screen time issues, and making that connection to potential curriculum implications. And that's it. So Charlie, did you have something?
I just wanted to add, Jennifer, again, I really appreciate your work as chair of the committee. This committee has been, it's certainly up in my favorites as a board member. We've had some excellent presentations by teachers about things that they're doing in the school system that are improving student learning. I remember one particular one having to do with English language learners, that the group of elementary school students were working together collaboratively to work with those students so to improve their English language capabilities so that they'd be more readily incorporated into the school environment. And there was also some time ago an account, I think, from Southeast teachers about the Castles program, which I found just enlightening to me. So I really appreciate the efforts that Jennifer will put into being the chair, and as well as the staff, in bringing timely, informative, and useful presentations to us.
Shout out to Eliza Proctor and Lucas about with all of your ideas too about how to structure that for the coming year. I'm excited about what it's gonna look like. So.
Director Horn Fraser, thank you. But I just have one question. You mentioned the next time the Education Committee would meet is August, so there won't be one in May?
I don't. Say that again. September.
Okay. So we're not meeting in May. Okay.
No.
Thank you.
Yes, we'll be updating you as we put things together.
Any other questions or comments on the Education Committee? All right, next up, we will have a policy review of the policies listed from Chair Director Lingo.
I'm going to take these one at a time and then stop to see if anybody has any questions or comments or thoughts. First up, we have 800s on the list, and what I have for notes on the 800s is that there are mostly changes to the designee, either designee becoming Chief Operating Officer or the Health Services Manager to become the Senior Health Services Manager. There were talks about linking the Climate Action Plan into the 800 series since it kind of lives in those policies. Any comments on the 800s? Okay, moving on to the 700s. First off, there were some notes of some other changes. This one, before I go into it, the plan is to table it for some other changes when we get to that point in the meeting. So if someone remembers to make the motion to table, it would be greatly appreciated because we don't want to pass it yet. But starting off with 701 3G1, vendor W-9 procedures, add a new section regarding vendors and doing direct deposit as preferred payment. 701.5 fiscal management, added language to make sure that the superintendent reviews and approves financial data prior to being presented to the board. 704.4 gifts and grants bequests, language added that the business office grant accountant will be responsible for the grant record keeping. 707.1 presentation of public financial information, language added stating that's the responsibility of the superintendent to ensure that the treasurer submits the report to the board annually. Payments for goods and services, again, language added into the direct deposit payment being the preferred one. Under the audits, some language added to the external auditor and their responsibilities. Then the 707.5G1, ICCSD capital projects planning and approval process for capital improvements requiring bid per the Iowa law, some language requiring regarding the advice of external finance and strategy. Then we moved on to the P-card issues. If we run into something, and one of the ones that got brought up again is running into issues like needing something at the last minute. The new classic example is the students at City High running into that problem last month where the travel company could not get our students to Germany. So what do you do with them for a day? And how do you help those students out? Then there were questions regarding the four-person approval process and plan, and in there we also it was pointed out to us that the last person in the process is just more of a checkmark person. Then just kind of the discussion language on that. One of the ideas behind the P-card process or the changes of it is to really get people off the credit card and using purchase orders just because it's easier and in some ways helps protect the people with the P-card from questions coming up about what they're doing. And then we asked for, again, some language to be added regarding emergency usage, and we kind of talked a little bit about that. And then just some other clarifications and verbiage throughout the document that Director Horn-Fraser brought up. So if she wants to mention any of those, or if she doesn't, that's fine too. I just don't want to speak for her. So.
I think you got it.
Okay.
Yeah, just points of clarification.
Anybody else? Okay. Now moving on to next on the list is the policy primers. Policy primers they're just aligned with current Iowa law and Department of Education guidance within, to align with those policies. I believe most of these came from either the Iowa School Board Association, which is usually part of the ALERS helping do the work on that. Then the 207, Policy 207, Board of Directors Legal Counsel. Questions were raised about just responding to questions, potential changes to sending the answers back to the full board, just cut down on the bottleneck of having to, for board leadership, to have to then bounce those answers back to the rest of the board. And then there were questions about board members potentially having restricted access to questions for the for legal counsel, and the idea was floated to give just access through to not go through board leadership for routine questions. Director Finch can probably explain that better because it was some of her ideas and thoughts.
So, yeah, so, and Chase is going to come back with some language on this, but as long as it is limited in scope and does not direct or authorize legal action and does not create significant cost to the district, so.
So that was on that one. Any questions? Okay, then I will move on to the next one, which is the 303.2 Administrator Qualifications, Recruitment and Appointment. This policy has there's a lot of overhaul to it. Just putting some of the things that are practices in the placement are practices into actual words for the policy to follow. One of the things that we did talk about is clarifying board members' participation in the interview process for certain administrative positions like central office and building principals, and then we kind of discussed whether or not how the kind of representation in building principal interviews. Any questions there? Comments? Okay.
We discussed will and may language.
Will, yes.
So board members will be involved in interview process for central administrators, and they may be involved for interview processes for building administrators.
And then, 303.4, administrator salary and other compensation. We talked about still wanting to see an additional information. In addition, that would make sure that changes to contracts are given to the board for notification for any major changes. So, anything else? Okay, that's the excitement of policy board review meeting today.
Great.
So,
Thank you so much, Director Lingo. That takes us to the discussion item portion for tonight. And the first up is the district's cash flow update and need for anticipatory warrants. So we have PFM here with us tonight. Suzanne Gerlach, I thought I saw her.
Yeah, I'll give Suzanne a minute to come up to the podium here as Kim draws up her presentation. But yes, we have Suzanne Gerlach here from PFM tonight. You guys had submitted some questions following the presentation. We turned some of those around to you. There was one update to the presentation. I know Suzanne will share that she's got some additional level of detail too that we can follow up. We didn't feel it was a good idea to change the presentation midday today to do that, but we do have some additional slides or information. She may or may not pull those up tonight, but there's some additional detail that can be provided to you via email that way too, that addresses some of the things the community was asking about tonight. So with that, I'm gonna kind of let her share progress update and then give you guys obviously a chance to answer any questions you might have about the approach.
All right, thank you. So unfortunately I wasn't able to provide the detailed information in enough time to get it on the agenda as part of the packet for tonight. So I will be sending out a revised presentation probably tomorrow that will have a lot of the detail that I'm going to talk through tonight. Okay, so I'm going to start by doing a progress report, what's happened since April 1st. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail than what's in the slides, but we'll talk about that. Then I'm going to talk about year-to-date general fund financial projections. We have another month. We have our biggest revenue month in April with a large property tax payment, and we are that much closer to the end of the fiscal year. So I'm going to talk about the variances that we saw since April 1st. I'm going to talk about some of the unknown variables that are continuously being resolved. Time is our friend at this point, right? So that the work is being done behind the scenes and where we are for the progress that's being made. I'm going to give an interfund loan update, and then I'll talk about some projections on June 26th general fund ending cash balance. I am revising my recommendation for the warrants. We'll get into why. And there is a solution on the table where there would be no warrants needed by June 30th and potentially no warrants needed in fiscal 27, but that again is a board decision and we'll walk through the specifics of each of the options. There's only one ask tonight, and that will be regarding the interfund loan from general fund to save. That's the only decision that I'm asking for direction on tonight. Everything else I will be back on May 12th to discuss the other two options for the repayment of the insurance fund loan. So hopefully that will give everybody enough time, answer any more questions, provide more detail in order for everybody to feel comfortable making a decision. All right, so fiscal progress since April 1st. When I was here, I presented what I would call the worst case scenario, right? That's sort of, I think, where we needed to start. I just started going through the details and getting up to speed in March. And so I have been working as rapidly as I'm able. Unfortunately, Iowa City is not my only client. I'm doing everything I can to get into the detail, but the work is evolving. Everything is happening at a very rapid pace. And so, you know, there were concerns. The July 1st, 25th beginning cash balance, the capital dollars that have been encumbered versus capital dollars spent. And since then, there has been progress made. At the time, PFM was recommending $25 million warrants to be issued. And that was primarily driven by the fact we had a June 1st debt service payment due in SAVE that we did not have funding for. It didn't make sense to me to do 3 different little loans. It made sense to do one loan. It's going to be more economical. It makes more sense to do one large loan and then do what we need to do and size it appropriately. So we took a conservative stance. I thought 25 was the max that we would need. We went, I submitted a term sheet, a terms of offering to a local bank and to 2 national banks, and we did not receive any bids. Nobody opted to offer a proposal on $25 million for the district. So that meant we had to figure out how to meet our June 1st problem. We continued conversations with the local bank. I got feedback from the other banks. And I just decided, or I made the recommendation that we need to pause. We need to just pause for a second and figure out where we were, and I wanted board input before we made any recommendations. And so I'm here tonight with what I am proposing as a solution and multiple paths forward for the board to make decisions that will obviously have an impact in 27, but the decision that we need tonight is what to do about the June 1st SAVE revenue bond payment. That's the decision that is urgent. And if that moves forward, we would come back at the May 12th meeting and all would need to prepare a resolution authorizing that interfund loan. And so that's where we are. And I was also, during this time, everything was happening real time last week. I was also made aware that there's a second local bank that's interested in participating. We were trying to see if we could find some sort of local bank way to put together, but we weren't going to get to $25 million. And so we needed to pivot. We need to figure out what we could do, what made sense. And so we just took a pause, and I recommended that we stop conversations with the local banks until we figured out the options to move forward. So, you know, since April 1st, I heard the comments and what's changed, right? Well, the 24 work audit papers are finished. We don't have a 24 audit that's completed, but there will be by June 30th. Having another year's audit is a big deal, right? Having a 24 audit available on June 30th, that is some of the comments we got from, obviously lenders. There's a lot of uncertainty until the auditors get through it. The 25 audit work is underway, right? And so internal control testing has been completed for fiscal 25. Reconciliations are not done, but that audit should be available at December 31st of 26. And I think that's been clearly communicated by our interim CFO. You also have a new CFO that is joining, and I really would like her to be part of the conversation. And so I think, again, having time work in our favor in this case, where we just put a pause. I don't like rushing to try and get things done. That's not the best way to do business. I think we need to put a pause. And the last thing I'll say is that you have a former staff member that has come back to assist the district in getting caught up with fund reviews and reconciliations. And so he started in 26 and has worked backwards. And so we know the cash balances. We know that fund, that revenues were put in the right fund in 26. We know that expenditures were put in the right fund, and he's moving backwards. And so that is increasing our confidence. I wouldn't say I'm very confident, but it is increasing our confidence that we know where we are today. Cash in the bank is cash in the bank today. Is it in the right fund? Are things being moved around? That's where, that work is still being done, and I'm not suggesting otherwise. So where we are for general fund to date, sorry, I'm flipping between both my presentations, so bear with me. I'm trying to make sure I give you all of the updated information. So I will say that, let me go back for a second, my other presentation. Okay, so FY '26 year-to-date, we saw positive variances in the actual financial performance based on where we were with the March actuals when I was here in April 1st. The detail of which I know staff, and Kurt's behind the pole, so I can't look Kurt in the eye, but Kurt has, I think, provided to the board, I think you have a detailed analysis of what the $4.6 million is in additional revenue. I don't know if you have any comments to add, Kurt, what the expenditure reductions are, but there was a net positive variance of $6.5 million. And so that gives me a higher level of confidence that we can fund an internal loan of $7.32 million. Now, it's not June 30th, 26. I am going to give you two paths that if we need to borrow before June 30th, we still can. But there is an option to not borrow before June 30th, to wait and borrow by September 1st. And I'll go through all those details in just a second.
I'm sorry, Suzanne,
Yes.
can we just pause to have Kurt answer that one question?
You bet.
Sorry, did anybody have any questions on any of that data that I assume Superintendent Degner communicated with the board in terms of what kind of the parts and pieces were that led to that variance?
I'll say I don't have any questions. It all made sense to me, but what is the format that we're going to give to make it public and accessible to everybody else? Because I really think that's what some people want to see is, and when I saw the chart, again, it all makes sense to me, but how are we going to communicate that out?
We'd probably just put that in a memo, right? And I was thinking we could do it for the 12th, trying to think about the questions, we might want to do something sooner. So I don't know how you guys would feel about a I don't know if we've done a memo attachment to a board item afterwards.
If we're going to
but-
upload the presentation, could we, because just so the
Capture
public
it in the
knows,
updated
we got it in a
presentation.
table form, so
Yeah.
it seems like it would be somewhat easy to flip the table into the amended presentation. I don't know if we can just
Yeah, I think we
do
can put it in
that.
whatever form. It's just maybe what you guys think would be the
Otherwise,
best
Mitch
to-
and I were prepared to go through our questions, like, if you wanted to answer them real quickly for the public tonight.
I think we can do either or both, whatever
Okay.
you guys would like to do.
What do you want to do?
I think the both for me.
Okay, so is it okay if we do both?
You're talking about
Okay.
for Director Finch, you're talking about the kind of the variance there. and
The
just-
questions that Mitch and I submitted
Yeah,
to be answered,
yep.
okay.
Kurt, you want to just go ahead and respond
And
to
if we
those
could
when
just
she-
answer them really briefly,
sure.
you don't
Yep.
have to go into details. But I can start with question one. Can we get an itemized breakdown of the increase in revenue as well as the decrease in expenditures? And so just for the public, our COO, Kurt, provided us with tables explaining those changes. And so I don't know if you want to go through that just real quickly, in terms of increases, federal grants, there was an income surtax payment, et cetera. Yeah.
Yep, I mean, those are the big things. I tried to highlight just what kind of some of the big picture things that came in that weren't maybe reflected in the projection that ultimately allowed going from the projection to actual, the variance to go to a positive direction. As mentioned, we got increased state funding for federal and state grants for our categoricals. We had about $637,000 in January. So that was a big reason. Our projected revenue within that other sources category was $121,611 if you go back to my March 24th presentation. But then the actual revenue was just over $940,000, so that's a positive variance. February of 26, within that same category, we had projected revenue of just under 1.3 million. We got closer to 4.2. We had an income surtax payment from the state of just over 1.8 million. We also had several districts that paid us open enrollment from larger districts, varying from over 650,000 to over almost 40,000. And then increased funding again from the state for our federal and state categoricals. We received that in February. We submitted claims in December for the second quarter, so that money was received in February. Another positive $1 million. And so overall, our difference in our projections versus what our actual receipts were was just under 2.9 million that month. So that's a big portion of that increase in revenue variance.
And what's the reason that those weren't part of the projections?
So I know as Controller Moran and I were working on the very first cash flows revenues are a lot more wavy over the course of the year, and so it becomes hard to determine exactly month to month what we're going to get. And so we took kind of an average and conservative approach. Obviously, we want to be conservative, don't be aggressive in this situation, and so that's why we saw a more positive variance overall.
I guess like one of my concerns is seeing this, variation, this sort of, I guess, volatility is that what if it goes the other direction,
Sure.
right?
Yep. Yep.
So how, is that a possibility?
There's always the concern of, did we get it earlier than normal and then it's going to be a negative variance, the next month, right? And that's certainly a possibility, but I don't predict that we'll see anything that volatile going down, that we would, only receive $100,000 or so in a month during the school year. Traditionally, our school year months are well over $1 million from our other sources.
Okay, and then the expenditures. Is this mostly a change in practices at the building level, the expenditures? Or?
Yeah, I would, as I kind of rolled through the expenses lines to see, what changed. I think one of the things to be cognizant of is, in mid-February, we kind of put on a spending freeze and indicated to our building leaders and our teachers that we needed to kind of rein in on some spending. And I think that March number is more a reflection of that work that we had pulled in on some things. And so we had projected expense of 3.8 million, give or take 3.8 million, and our actual expenses were around 2. And I've listed within the document what some of the bigger expenses we had are, which are some of our more traditional things. So our AEA flow-throughs, 421,000. Our transportation bill for the month was 379,000, give or take. Electric utilities just under 400,000. So that was a big part of the decrease just overall.
So I guess, I wanted to just take some time just right here and just thank everyone at the building levels, what they are doing, because their actions and their tightening down, which is, I know it has been very difficult for them, but it is making a difference here.
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay. I can go on to the next question. Assuming part of the increase involves the sale of 1725 North Dodge, which it does not, what happens if that sale does not go through? And your answer was that basically we're looking at what our balance will be in September.
Yeah, it just changes the different deficit
Okay.
that we would face in FY27.
Okay.
Can we stick there for just 1 second and just get because we did get that specific question. Does the positive balance that we're seeing include the sale of the real property from the ESC?
It does.
Okay.
So the sale of the ESC is not then going into, it's not part of a UAB?
It would go in under miscellaneous income within our UAB, so it would raise our spending authority.
But I guess, Kurt, my question was like the positive money that we now have that we didn't, that includes the sale proceeds, or the sale proceeds?
No.
Okay, so I think we were on different pages.
Yep,
with
our projections that we've presented previously in May and June did include anticipated revenues for those property sales.
But this new money, for lack of a better word, that we found isn't because we're selling the old ESC.
No, correct.
That's separate money.
Yep.
Okay.
That's going into the UAB. And then one of my questions was, what would the UAB be if we did not, if that sale didn't go through? How close are our margins there?
Yeah, so the sale price is in the neighborhood of 3.2 million. Right now, our UAB projection, which is very much a projection, that's nothing we can predict complete certainty at this point because there's variables that won't be finalized till the fall in that. But it would probably take us from around 4 million down closer to 1 overall without that.
So we're cutting it pretty close,
Correct.
right? Okay. Any chance, that's 2 months from now, right? So, and we just talked about the variances. Any chance that we could go negative on our UAB with that close of a margin?
I mean, there's always that possibility, but I think I'd be more concerned personally with my knowledge of whatever happens at the state level. I think that's certainly Superintendent Degner can chime in on this. I think there's legislative actions and SBRC actions that have happened recently that I'd be more concerned about that turning us negative than what our situation is.
Okay.
I think a couple of things to remember. The property sales we've talked about, those will go into miscellaneous income. You have a resolution in May that would allow us to move those funds from PEPAL to general fund. That'll help the miscellaneous income for UAB. Overall, I just remind the public those concepts are separate. Cash is separate from our spending authority. So as we talk about those and kind of move in and out of those conversations, those are two different measures for us. Suzanne's works primarily on the cash. And so there's some intersection with UAB here about what that means for our spending authority with the state. The other thing is we have a positive adjustment that we'll be asking the SBRC for related to some transportation costs that were paid out of general that could be charged to PEPAL. So kind of to your point, Director Finch, about how narrow that margin is, we think that will also help improve that. We've previously shared in the SBRC exhibits the negative adjustment in regards to save. But we believe there'll be a positive adjustment there that'll, I don't have the exact amount in front of me, but it will somewhat wash that out. And so that will also improve our spending authority and then along with these property sales. So we're working really hard to make sure that we're as far away from any kind of a negative equation there as possible. And we'd feel good with those couple actions.
And then some of my questions I think might be better for later on in the presentation, actually. So that's, yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. And then there was a question. The district did not draw on the $3 million short-term warrant that was authorized. It matures on June 1st. And we do not anticipate drawing on that or needing to extend that at this time. We'll just let that mature. There were just legal fees as part of the issuance, but there will be no cost and there was no draw and there'll be no repayment of that $3 million warrant during fiscal 26. And you know, as I mentioned, some of the unknown variables that are being resolved, I already kind of talked about that. On the next slide, so the interfund loan update, and this is where I'm going to give a lot more information that's included in this presentation because I was really trying to focus on the SAFE interfund loan, but I think it's important to lay the foundation for the decision I'm going to ask for direction on May 12th. And so first I'll talk about the $7,320,000 interfund loan from general fund to SAVE. Now this has been and remains to be the most pressing fiscal need of the district. This is the one that has the ticking time bomb in my estimation. We have a June 1st principal and interest payments to make, and SAVE does not have the cash without an interfund loan from general fund. And so initially, when we were looking at the $25 million, that's when all of this was going to get lumped together and we were just going to move forward. Now, since we aren't getting $25 million, that's not an option. So now we pivot after Kurt and the team and everybody reworked the 26 budget, re-looked at the cash balances. We literally, you know, reconciled, he took the time to reconcile the bank statements to the cash in the bank. We have, and I put the FY26 cash flow in the packet specifically to show you, I think that we can, I'm fairly confident that we can, I know we can fund it prior to the June 1st payment deadline, and I would recommend we do that, fund it no later than May 22nd because UMB Bank will be pulling those funds prior to June 1st to make that payment. Now, option 1 and option 2 for the insurance interfund loan repayment will dictate June 30th, 26 decisions. And so at this time, I would just ask for direction if we're comfortable. Maybe I'll come back to that. I'll put a pin in it for just a second, and then I'm going to go through the option 1 and 2 for interfund loan that may impact your decision on the SAVE interfund loan. But did you have a question?
I just wanted to ask one question about waiting to pay off the insurance interfund loan.
Yep.
The one caveat that I don't remember if it was you, Suzanne, or if it was Kurt, who explained to us that waiting until after the end of the fiscal year would result in an audit note or finding. And so I'm wondering how that will affect our credit rating and our ability to to get warrants in the future.
Yeah, and so since we were gonna be borrowing, I was recommending we pay it. There's no reason, if we had funds available, there was no reason to hold and not pay it. It's not required it's not legally due until September 1st. That's the state law requirement, is that any interfund loan must be repaid by September 1st of the following fiscal year. And so that's always been true. But since we were gonna have the warrant proceeds up front, it made sense to just repay it. It would be noted that it would be an interfund loan outstanding. It's not unusual for interfund loans to be outstanding, but the cash would still be in the general fund, which sort of is a net credit from cash. So cash in the general fund or an interfund loan due, it's a fund balance versus a cash, right? And so it's two different metrics. And so one will have the cash in it in the scorecard. The fund balance would be net of due tos and due froms, would have a lower fund balance.
I guess I'm just asking from someone who doesn't have any financial background at all. So I'm just wondering like how significant it would be to have that sort of note on our audit that we did not pay. That's not significant at all. Okay, because I guess that was offered as the reason why we were paying it off before the end of the fiscal year. And so I was wondering how important that was to do that. Not that important?
No.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Yeah.
No.
My question about the loan also is, or repaying the health insurance fund, are we like positive there's going to be enough money in there to pay our claims to people? Because that's,
That was my question.
yeah, how much money, are we positive we're going to be able to pay since we're a self-funded group?
Yeah, so we obviously monitor that very closely, and the nice thing about that is every 2 weeks there is an infusion of cash in that, just with the premium payments that are swung over from employee contributions and then district contributions, and so I think we'll be fine getting to September. I don't have a lot of concern about that.
Along those lines, if we did have some sort of higher than anticipated payment that we would have to make out of the insurance fund, do we have enough speed and agility to do maybe a smaller interfund, maybe not pay back the full $10 million, but say we found ourselves in a position where we needed $1 million, could we partially repay the loan to cover whatever immediate need there was?
Yeah, I wasn't sure if
that's
Deputy Superintendent Ramey pulled his microphone up. I wasn't sure if he was going to. Yes, that's always an option that we can make payments within that time frame. Because that would be a payment on the loan then overall. So
and we have enough agility as a district and a board
Yep.
to approve those in relatively quick order.
I to my knowledge, and we can certainly consult with legal on this, I don't believe there's any board action required to make a payment on the loan.
Pay back the loan. Okay.
And I'm assuming that account is watched weekly, bi-weekly, or daily?
Daily.
Thank you.
Suzanne, we also talk a little bit about you started to touch on it, the importance of the fund balance at the end of June, and why that might be a important part of the strategy.
And so maybe I'll just go right to the cash flow, and we can talk a little bit about, this is the revised FY26 cash flow. The amended presentation will have 27. I'm not hiding 27. I was focused on getting to June 30th of 26 in our conversation today. The estimated fund balance so this includes the repayment, and I don't know if my mouse here, I don't know if I can make this, I probably can't make, I can, good, okay. I'm gonna limit my technology abilities. So the $7.32 million assumes that we're transferring out of the general fund an interfund loan to save. It assumes that we are not making any repayment to the insurance loan. This is option one, right? So this would be option one, and this estimates that we're projecting $21.35 million on June 30th of 26 in the general fund. Now, how confident are we in the July 1st? With a $21 million balance, even with like a $5 million variance, which I think is a reasonable, we know what the cash was in July, if things were done inappropriately, in my mind, 25% seems to be a reasonable margin of error. I still think we're okay. Do you want to pay something on the insurance loan? You certainly could. Again, that decision will impact 27 and our need to borrow a warrant before the September 1st due date, right? And so those are the two options. And again, I'll have more information. There'll be an updated cash flow. I have 3 different versions of the general fund cash flow in my amended presentation. One is option 1, not repaying before June 30th, holding until after July 1st, holding until fiscal 27. It maintains a more positive cash balance. It's the highest cash balance option for June 30th to 26, which will definitely support your credit when we get this audit, when we're ready to talk about credit moving forward. That will definitely be a credit strength to have the extra cash in the fund. But the scorecard looks at total cash. So whether it's sitting in the general fund, whether it's sitting in the insurance fund, whether it's sitting in another fund, it's total cash. So that's really at the board discretion on where you think that cash needs to be. So, and then there's a second option where we do the option 2 would be waiting until option 1, waiting till after July 1st, and then that shows that you're going to get in July of 26 is the first year the Department of Education will be making your state aid payments in quarterly payments. So you're going to get 3 months in July, which tremendously impacts the cash flow. And so, again, to be conservative, PFM assumes it's coming on August 1st, just in case it's not here in time to make that 1st July payroll. And then the low point, right, the low point in cash is always going to be the month before you get your large property tax payment. So September is a low point and March is the low point. And so the options are going to show you how close we're willing to take that margin, because one of them, with the no borrowing scenario, gives you the smallest cash balances in March and September and March, but it gives you a higher ending cash balance because you're not paying interest. And so that's where I'm saying there may be an option where you do a smaller interfund loan after the 10 million, whether it's insurance or another fund. There could be a small, whatever we feel comfortable with. Hopefully by then as well, we have another audit done. We're through 25 work papers. We're making progress. Like, you know, everything is happening in real time. I feel like we're kind of like, what's the game, Tetris, where something moves and then everything shifts. And so so as the work gets caught up, time works in our favor. And that's where I feel like I want to reiterate, time is working in your favor because there's a lot of good work happening behind the scenes to get everything caught up. And so let me see. So a few considerations. I did want to make some comments. You know, the presentation of the 2 different options. Option 1, at the end of 26, there would be the 21,359,000, 21.359 million. That's 35 days cash on hand. So that's over 1 month cash balance. You would not need to borrow warrants prior to June 30th. Again, that is time to get another audit done and hopefully published. That allows time for audit completion, integration of a new CFO, which I think is really important to get your new CFO involved, get her voice, let her expertise work for you. And then the internal fund reconciliation, the bank reconciliations, all of those things that are happening in real time, we just get more time under our belt, and it all reduces the uncertainty. That is what gave the lenders pause, right? That's what gave the lenders pause, was all of the uncertainty. And so time is going to eliminate more and more uncertainty as we move forward.
Quick question.
Yeah.
What metrics did you use to make the assumption that we would have a sufficient cash on hand in option 1 for July 1 payroll? Did you look at previous July 1 payroll, factor in any increases? How did we get to that?
It's the actual budget provided by the district for what they estimate monthly payroll to
okay,
be.
The estimate.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, we've been tracking, payroll pretty closely, and so it's a kind of a carryover. And the important thing to note is, through reductions and everything, you know, a teacher who may not be joining us next year, we still pay them through July and August, and so those things are still on the payroll. So we wouldn't see a significant change in payroll overall, indicating the reductions until we get to September in the fall.
Okay.
What?
And,
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
You can
Yep.
finish your thought.
Okay, yep, and I was just gonna say, okay, the insurance interfund loan would be noted, and the 26 audit is still outstanding, to Director Finch's point. And the FY 27, June 30th of 27's projected cash balance would be 18.3 million, which is 30 days cash on hand, and that assumes that that's repaid and there's no borrowing in that scenario. Now, the monthly cash flows, again, is where we need to talk about if there would need to be a small interfund or something, or maybe we need to just do a small warrant borrowing and do a smaller sized borrowing. But 30 days would be sufficient to get July payroll taken care of before the receipt of the state aid that comes. And then I make another note that my original warrant recommendation was based on the immediate need, that driving the timeline was always the save need. It was never the interfund loan repayment. It was always the save need. That was the immediate, hurry up, let's go, what do we need? Let's make really conservative assumptions and see what we can do. And so the other option that I am providing, option 2, is and you could pay the full insurance interfund loan. That is tongue twister for me tonight. The insurance interfund loan prior to June 30th. That would, without any borrowing, would leave you just $10.9 million of cash. That's 18 days cash on hand. And that would not be sufficient to make July payroll prior to the receipt of state aid. So what that does is it accelerates the need to issue a warrant. And that means we would be seeking a lender without that 24 audit in hand, which I think will go a long way into eliminating some of that uncertainty. I ran some initial estimates. I think 7 million is probably, I was in the 5 to 10 range. I think if we split the difference at like 7, I think that would be, if you choose option 2, that would be where I would recommend 5 to 7. Probably do a not to exceed 7. Maybe we could do a not to exceed 10, and the district would reserve the right to reduce that final borrowing until we authorize in June. We would ask bids for not to exceed a certain amount, reserve the right to reduce it if we didn't need it all, and then authorize that in June, should it be the district's choice.
Can you go through that one more time for me?
Yes.
Thank you.
So we would, just as, again, 5 to 10 million is the range. 5 would be the minimum if we're going to pay by June 30th. 10, I think, is the high end. Split the difference. I ran a scenario that'll be in the packet at 7 million. I recommend that we do, if we're going to go that route, then immediately after March 12th, I am drafting a whole nother term sheet. We would be seeking, we could do not to exceed $10 million, but the district would reserve the right to issue less should it be needed by June when you're authorizing issuance, right? Because we're going to be now going in May. We won't have a 24 audit. We're still working through things. 10 million is the number if we don't need it. I wouldn't want to borrow it if we didn't need it, and then make the decisions with the most up-to-date information in June, authorize the issuance, and then proceed with a $7 million, and then so FY 27, June 30th of 2027 with no warrants, I estimate $18.3 million cash balance. But again, the July, the monthly cash flows aren't cash flowing. It's not a June 30th problem. It is a cash flow liquidity problem as the ebbs and flows of revenue in and expenditures out. And so 18.3 million is 30 days of cash on hand. But with the warrants, you're going to actually have a little bit less because you would pay interest on the $7 million, right? So you'd have 17.9, which is 20 days cash on hand, which is still sufficient to make the July payroll. So I've given you what it looks like to do option 2 to pay the insurance interfund loan by June 30th and do no borrowing. And then if you did a $7 million warrant. Again, just giving you both options to look at in the cash flow.
I'm sorry. Kurt, have you run the numbers to see what the additional interest payments are going to be if we don't pay the health insurance fund back for those 2 extra months? Do you have any ballpark idea of what that cost is?
I have not run that, to be honest. I mean, it was $400,000 annually, so you divide that by 12. That should give you.
So like maybe another 60,000.
I was gonna say in the neighborhood of 50,000 was what I was gonna say. So
that's your number's nicer than mine. I mean, I seem to recall that just to get the $3 million anticipatory warrant and not to draw down, that cost about $20,000 in fees, and that's without paying any interest. So I mean, what I'm hearing you say is we can do option 2, but we're going to have to we're going to have to get another anticipatory warrant, which is going to cost the district money. I would think at least $20,000 plus the interest that we would pay on that. Or we can just sit and pay a little bit more in interest, $50,000 to $60,000 more of interest with the loan that we already have. I mean, am I missing something? Because it seems like a really obvious choice. I just like, what are there any downsides about option 1A that we haven't like fully discussed? I get that there may be the negative finding on the audit for not paying it back, but other than that, are there any other downsides that we need to be aware of?
Not that I have a list, no, my recommendation is option 1, and I was gonna get to my recommendation is PFM, but yes.
My question would be would we have difficulty getting that $5 to $10 million warrant if we couldn't get the 25 million?
So in conversations with local banks, they were much more comfortable with a smaller amount. They asked for either a smaller amount or a shorter duration or additional credit facility. Those are the 3 things that were requested in conversations. And so this is obviously a much smaller amount than 25 million. I also have in here that the district could incur additional fees to engage a placement agent. I'm not a placement agent, I'm a municipal advisor. And so if we wanted to broaden the network, the district could choose to engage a placement agent who has a broader banking network outside just, I'm working with your partners. I was getting district advice, who are your partners, and that's who I went to, people that you have borrowed from in the past, people that you bank with, but that's sort of outside of my realm of expertise. So if I'm confident that the 2 banks, the local banks that I talked to, could probably do that if we needed to.
And do you think that's a change in circumstance because the fiscal year 24 audit is complete, so they'll have a better, more assurance about our financial situation, and because the amount that we need to borrow is less, therefore they bear less risk overall? The difference between a $25 million loan and a $5 million loan.
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak for the bank boards, but but yes, that was the feedback we received: smaller amount, shorter duration, or additional credit facility. And so we brainstormed and exhausted options for additional credit facility. The district's very limited into what the district has the ability to do for additional credit, but this is definitely a much smaller amount.
So I'm sorry, additional credit facilities, is that having someone else sort of co-sign the loan or putting up collateral?
Right, so we investigated, you can restrict cash. I even suggested we restricted a portion of the proceeds as like a debt service reserve fund would be just there for liquidity. But yes, sought feedback on if someone else could guarantee the loan. No luck there. The district's not allowed to give a mortgage in a property. That's not an option. So there wasn't a lot of choices there that made the lenders comfortable.
Rossini, if you don't mind, I asked a couple of questions. Kurt, were you talking about an annual interest payment of $400,000 as part of one of these options?
No, the interest rate for the health insurance fund loan, for if it were a 12-month borrow, was in the neighborhood of 400,000. Okay, so we would not owe that annually. Just
right. Okay.
Yep.
So the one thing, just as a reminder, while we don't want to be in a position of needing to do the interfund loans, I think perspective we'll want to keep in mind is it's always better to borrow from ourselves because that money, the interest is still being paid to another fund of ours, right? Rather than to an outside institution, just for as people are listening or for our consideration. So that interest, right, then goes to the insurance fund in that sense, so it doesn't leave our district.
Yeah, that certainly makes some sense to me. And the second question I had, Kurt, we have all these scenarios depend a lot upon our expenses, knowing what our expenses are going to be. So are we confident now? Maybe Nick will be a part of this answer too. Are we confident now that we can predict what our payroll expenses are going to be and stick to them?
Yeah, I have a lot of confidence for that to finish out the fiscal year. And obviously, as we get through our negotiated agreements with our groups, we'll have a better understanding of what next year's will look like overall. As I look at the cash flow that's on the screen, you know, we were just under $2 million in general expenses, non-payroll expenses for the month of March, and April, May, and June are, you know, closer to 4 or 5, and so I'm confident that we hopefully projected much higher than what will come in at on those overall. And so I'm hoping that the trend we saw in March, I hope continues, but we're certainly tracking it.
And then Nick's not here, but he's had staffing meetings with Eliza and with Lucas. And so we've already started looking at our staffing levels at the elementary level, at the middle school level, and at the high school level for next year. So as we do those payroll projections, as Kurt talked about, as we come out of negotiations, we'll know where they are and be able to better forecast how those will roll out in the fall. In addition to some improvements we've made with position control tracking to complement our HRIS, our HR information systems, so that we have a better real-time look into when we're adding staff, when staff are exiting, so we can better match that with payroll and how we track that through the fall.
Okay, great. Thanks very much. Sorry I didn't have my glasses on, so I didn't see Nick.
It's all right.
Being absent.
Sorry. When I look at the interfund loan to save, what is the interest that save will have to pay back to it's back to the general fund, right?
Yes, it would be back to the general fund. We were originally using what I anticipated to be the borrowing rate for the general fund, but since this won't be based on a borrowing, I would recommend when you do the resolution, it would be a rate that's like the opportunity cost of what you could invest at. So whether it's 4% or 4.5%, whatever the current investment rate is, that would be my recommendation for, currently we're assuming 6% to answer your question.
Okay. And how much does that end up being? I think Kurt might have the number somewhere, but.
Well, I had 4% in my answer, and it was 439,000. But even today, the borrowing rate when we checked our investment was 3.7. So,
I mean, I think that there's some importance to point out that that's almost 500. And I get that it's not going to a bank and that it's getting reinvested back or put back in the district. But at the end of the day, that's 500,000, somewhere close to $500,000. That could go to actual buildings and to facilities and to help our facilities. Go ahead.
So let me go back, let me think. So, any other comments on option 1? Let me look and see if there's anything else I wanted to mention. So I will be, coming back on May 12th. Again, there'll be an updated presentation that sort of walks through, gives you like, you know, the PowerPoint of everything I just shared with you, so you have time to think about it. We'll be asking for direction on if we're going to hold and do option 1, that is PFM's recommendation to wait until after June 30th. It allows time to work in your favor. It allows, anyway, from my perspective, I think it's a better cash flow scenario. And then depending, it gives us time to get further in the audit reconciliation process and all the different things. And so, 1 second, I'm flipping through all my cash flow to make sure I have anything else in here I wanted to mention.
Suzanne, don't we kind of need some basic direction tonight? Because we'll need the resolution on the meeting for the 12th for your consideration. So if there was any, I think, significant issues with option 1 versus option 2, we probably would want to spend some time hearing that tonight. I think from what you guys are saying, option 1 seems amenable to you, so we could, load that resolution. It wouldn't prevent you from still not going ahead with that if we got to the point, but it would definitely make things difficult if we didn't know.
I know you're going to be sharing FY27 information in your revised presentation. As we're thinking about the question you just outlined, it sounds like you're not seeing anything that poses significant risk to this scenario in what you have for 27, but I just want to ask the question. Maybe a better question is, what do you see as potentially the biggest risk ahead in 27 that might cause us to just think again about going with option 1, say?
Okay. I would say the biggest, it's the monthly cash flow, right? So until all of the audit work is complete, we don't know 100% if there was any money. The only thing that would happen now is if there's monies in the general fund that are owed to another fund and need to come out of the general fund. That's the biggest risk. Based on, prior staff's review, and again, it's not audited. We feel we're within a margin of error of comfort for that, but then it becomes monthly liquidity. That's always the number one thing. And so, that's why I'm bringing up that if we're not going to borrow, then there may be a need for an interfund loan, and that would be a resolution coming to the board to seek an interfund loan. Should we see something, we should know by August if we're going to need something in September, and that would be just one meeting, a resolution authorizing interfund loan, and then it could go right back the next month in October. It doesn't even have to be a long-term solution. It's literally a monthly cash flow situation, and when you see the 27 cash flows, you'll see it's September and it's March. Those are the 2 months, and so,
Thank you.
Yes.
At the last meeting, this is some clarification. Some of the stipulations, like the note, keep your expenditures to 2%, roughly $1 million for SAVE, pay as you go until 2839, no capacity to bond on SAVE till 2839, and PEPAL only for like life cycle projects over the next 2 years. Those all remain. Correct or incorrect, or?
For now, yes.
For now, okay.
Yeah, we're still working through the capital funds. I've been very focused on your general fund because we have a very immediate needs. And so just as soon as we wrap this conversation up and I get direction, that's the next thing up. And I think it's in June. I'm looking, superintendent, yeah. In June, I will be back to talk about PEPAL and SAVE and capital capacity.
But along the lines of PEPAL, I know that there's the life cycle budget that we have, but I thought that you had told us that you do anticipate us having some authority within Pebbles somewhere of the $45 to $60 million range. Is that accurate?
Capacity, yes.
Capacity, yes.
Yes.
Okay.
That would have to be loaned on, right?
Yes, that is correct. And
Right.
so there are considerations for that.
And how do you feel about our potential bond rating at the moment? I know we're at a 6.25% interest rate on our most recent warrant, which puts us at the Federal Reserve BAA 3 or BAA minus rating, the lowest rating to receive a loan. Do you foresee that to continue on future loans, or do you see, as we get the audits figured out, that improving?
Well, until I see the numbers in the audit, I can't really give you a picture, but I would say where your fund balances are now are very similar to where they were the last time we sought a rating, which would have probably, the last rating conversation with Moody's was in 23, I believe. And so fund balances, I'd have to look, but I think fund balances might even be a little stronger than they were back in 23. The district was on negative watch that time. You're also just opening Liberty High School at that time, and so cash balances were very strained in the general fund. How everything shakes out, I would have to run a scorecard for it, but obviously there will be, there's a qualitative analysis and a quantitative analysis, right? The scorecard depends on the cash balances, the things in the audit. Management will be an issue. Management is part of the scorecard. There will be discussions, having a new CFO with years of experience. There will be discussions about past things that the rating agencies will look at risk from, has it been addressed, and, and when, what's the plan, and how was it addressed? Things happen.
I'm trying to remember, you sent out earlier this week, we have $280 million in debt right now. Is that roughly $280 million?
That sounds right.
Thank you.
Suzanne, did you mean 2017 when we opened Liberty? I think you said 2023, and then you said that was the year we opened Liberty.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Liberty
was 2017.
Was it
middle schools?
Oh,
But
sorry.
middle schools, is that what you? Oh.
Oh, it was in, yeah, it was a new school that year. I apologize.
Oh, it was the middle schools.
It was,
Okay.
yeah, it was a new school, sorry.
got it.
I misspoke, yes, thank you.
I just want to circle back to the $45 to $60 million capacity that we have in Pebble. You said that that we have capacity for that and we'd have to loan on it. But I mean, historically for the past 10 years, we've been loaning on all of our Pebble and Save, correct?
PEPAL was leveraged at the beginning of Facility Master Plan 1.0 and hasn't been leveraged since, I don't believe. SAVE, again, as I shared last time, is fully leveraged through 2038, 2039. And GO bonds, you're under the 270 tax rate, but that would require voter approval.
Okay. And, but that wouldn't represent a dramatic change of course to leverage against pay. I mean, we've done that in the past with other funds. That's how, it's a normal course of business and how we could do things.
Yes.
Okay.
And there is a process to seek a rating, to seek a private rating, to see what the outcome would be before we would go to the market. Obviously, having all of the audits, I, spoke directly to Moody's staff about what is a timely audit. They said they want an audit within 12 months of the end of the fiscal year, can make an exception for up to 18 months because there are lots of communities that are seeing lags in their audit, but that would be a special circumstance. And so we would need audits within 12 months, preferably no later than 18 months with an exception that Moody's would be willing to grant. And with, multiple years, I can't opine if they'd allow the 18-month exception.
But you would have a stronger forecast on PEPL and SAVE, you said in June?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. We're doing the same activity to go cash balances, what's, in that case, it's what's encumbered for capital, what's been spent, what's not, all of that sort of thing. So it's a ongoing exercise. Okay, and let's see. And I just I'll clarify a comment. The new CFO integrated and ensure that they are supportive of the plan. I'm not commenting that the new CFO would be supportive of the plan. I would want the new CFO's opinion to make sure they are supportive of the plan. So I wanted to clarify that. And again, worst case, best case, worst case scenario, we would need, I would say, $7 million by September 1st to buffer the monthly cash flows. We should know maybe by July, definitely by August. Best case, there's no need for it to issue debt out from a bank and to internally fund with an interfund loan anything that would need to be short-term, month-to-month cash flow borrowings, assuming we have a sufficient buffer in the general fund. That's why I have the asterisk. It just really depends on where we end actual June 30 with cash, and then what the monthly cash flow looks like. So, and I did take a quick look. I know there were some comments. I did take a quick look at the payroll and benefits that we are estimating for fiscal 27, and they are at or less fiscal 26 in every month in our projections in the cash flow based on the reductions and based on the guaranteed, I think, the salaries or something. I'm looking at the staff.
The budget guarantee? Is that what
Thank
you mean?
you.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Thank you. Didn't want to use incorrect terminology. So that is, my other observations and considerations. I'm here. I'm your municipal advisor, so I'm doing a little bit more than is in my normal scope of business to assist the district through this process. Normally, I'm just part of your borrowing process and helping you through the borrowing, through the credit process, but this is important, and I'm here to support the district in any way I can. And again, want to make sure that when I present information, it's accurate, it's actionable. So anyway, I'm here to help. Any other questions?
Kurt, I have some questions for you maybe. Thank you for the presentation. It was really great. So I'm hoping that you can correct my thinking if I'm wrong or walk me down the path so that I understand. I've been reflecting a lot on this, and I remember 3 or 4 months ago, right, I think somebody in this room said school finance is a bit unique. It's a bit of its own beast. It's not really, it's just a special way that it works. And so when I'm looking at this table that hopefully we're going to make public soon so that the public can see it too, I think maybe that highlights some of the points that were being made about the uniqueness of school funding. Like when I see that we got over $600,000 of grant money, kind of unexpected. We don't control when those payments hit, right?
Not always, no.
And if, for example, like for a federal grant, somebody comes in and decides to doge everything and say, we're gonna stop paying out money, like that's going to delay our recipient or our receipt of those funds, correct?
Correct. We did not get any federal title funds this year until January, which is not normal. Normally, we would have received that money in the fall.
And
some of that money in the fall as we submit claims that we have to quarterly.
And when that happens, which is somewhat unique to school districts, that puts us in a really difficult position with our cash flow, correct?
Yeah, I mean, yes, because we get in the fall what our allocation is, which helps Eliza and Lucas determine how they're going to staff some of the buildings based on what our allocation is. And so we've committed that. So when we're not getting those funds immediately or in the time we would normally expect them, it would create a hardship.
And then like the same thing with the money that we got, it's labeled as other sources, but part of it is open enrollment checks from Clear Creek and Manna, total over $670,000.
Yep.
We know we're gonna get those someday, but Clear Creek has to get their payments
Right.
and then get them to us. So again, the uncertainty about when those are going to hit is what can contribute to a problem that the district has with its cash flow, correct?
Yep.
And so when we were looking a month ago at needing $25 million in warrants, that was to solve the cash flow problem, correct?
Yes.
And so that's what the anticipatory warrant's for. But as I understand it, right, it's a lot more complicated than just cash flow because we also have our spending authority, which is totally, and that's why I didn't want to go down this road with you, is that because you don't do our spending authority, right? So it seems like, based on this presentation, that our cash flow issues seem to be resolving in a more positive direction. Is that an accurate statement?
That would be my opinion as well.
Okay, but we still have concerns about our overall spending authority and our UAB, and part of that is because we are going to be on budget guarantee next year, correct?
Yeah, but I wouldn't say that that's specific to the UAB concerns necessarily.
That's fair. That's
Yeah.
fair. But we're going to be on budget guarantee next year, and that's because because of two factors, right? We have a decline in enrollment, and the state set SSA at 2%. Is that correct?
Correct. That is correct.
And that decision that we are going to be on budget guarantee happened on October 1st when we certified our count, and then in February when the legislature voted on SSA, correct?
Correct.
So that is a factor external to the cash flow problem. And we still need to be looking at our spending authority and our budget in order to get our budget back on track. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, absolutely.
So we still, while the cash flow problem is resolving in a positive direction, we, the board, still need to be looking at how can we balance our budget better, how can we bring other costs in other areas, what can we cut, what can we reduce to deal with our spending authority, but then also that's where the UAB comes in as well, building that up to a healthy and safe level, correct?
Correct.
So just because we've gotten some positive news on the cash flow front doesn't mean that that positive news, sorry to be a downer, doesn't mean that that positive news transfers over to the budgetary situation, which is a different but related problem.
Correct.
That's all, I'm correctly understood our situation.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Kurt.
So, and if I could just follow that up, Director Williams, because I was just curious what our special ed deficit would be for the next fiscal year, because that's part of the cash flow issue, right? Is that our special ed deficit increased from 9 to 10 million to 19 million that we were levying but wouldn't levy until FY27, and that's part of the reason why we didn't have the cash flow. And so I'm wondering what our special ed deficit is going to be for the next fiscal year.
We're projecting it to be about 19.4, I think, overall. And again, it's a projection because
similar. Okay.
We won't know until the fall once we submit the card, then we submit the SES, and then we submit the annual transportation report. Those are the three things that all have to happen September 15th. And so we don't know what the exact deficit is until that's completed.
I think at some point, I think that we in the community will need to see why that special ed deficit jumped, from 9 to 10 million to 19 million. If we could sort of
unpack that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yep. That would be really helpful for us. Thank you. Thank you, Suzanne.
Yeah. Sorry. I know tonight you had asked for direction on the resolution for May 12th, and this may sound like a silly question, but why couldn't we wait until May 12th, have both resolutions on, and allow directors to cast the vote. Hypothetically, if option one was the resolution that we passed, and then there's no need for the second resolution, just asking.
I think it's two separate issues. The interfund loan repayment, that I'm assuming, so I'm either option assume we're doing the interfund loan to general fund to save. I guess I'm not sure. Are you saying directing, having a resolution directing the repayment of the interfund loan? I don't know that that requires a resolution.
Okay.
Yeah, you wouldn't really need what you would need to prepare for then is potentially pursuing some borrowing in the future, right? Because yeah, we could still repay the interfund loan to the insurance fund, but then you would need to direct some work for them to pursue that additional lending. Again, I think we're on the same page with Suzanne that we, believe in option one and that's the path we should pursue. But yeah, you wouldn't need to have anything additional prepared there. We need to just prepare the resolution for the transfer from general fund to save.
Okay.
This is a pretty simple question, but we heard it a couple times tonight, and we've gotten emails about it too. Who exactly do you work with within the school district? Who do you work with?
So I meet biweekly and weekly sometimes with superintendent, assistant superintendent, I don't know your title, Chase, sorry, and your CEO, Kurt, and Kim, and the interim CFO. The four of us, five of us together meet biweekly and sometimes weekly depending on topics that are needed. And then we provide updates as we have new information available.
Thank you.
No, and kind of touched on this before, but, if Kurt wants to chime in too, you, in one of the earlier slide decks, said that PFM was highly confident in the cash balances given that we still have 10 months, and I know this is a question from the audience by several people, given that we still have 10 months of reconciliations complete for FY26, what made you feel more confident in our cash balances?
So Kurt, your CEO, took the time to go through literal cash in the bank. And again, the only thing that would be an issue, because we know the cash in the bank would be if there's money in the general fund that belongs somewhere else, which, I believe Les, right, who is former CFO, has been doing the work, started in FY26, and has been working backwards to say that things are deposited in the right fund. So he's looked at 26. I did not know that a month ago. And I don't know, I can't speak to the progress of his work. I don't know how rapidly I think he's been helping since February.
And I guess this is for the superintendent. What is the contingency plan if the SBRC reduces either the special education or ELL deficits substantially?
Yeah, I was just thinking about that when Director
Because
Finch
this
asked the
comes
question about
we'll find out in June and be like, oh, July we have to.
Yeah, so before we had got asked to appear with the SBRC, which got moved from April 24th to June 9th for the public's information, we'll have some updated exhibits for you likely here on May 12th that reflect some of the earlier points I was making. When we were meeting with the SBRC and notifying them of the change in our situation since we appeared in December, they had talked about if a district couldn't handle the spending authority change, that there would likely be a multi-year process to working through that. So we would need to work with them on that, Director Lingo. I will say that we've completed a couple phases of a special ed review with the DE, justifying our different expenditures or catching anything that was potentially inappropriately coded to special education. I think I can't give you a number. I don't know if anybody else from the team knows, but there's been several districts in the state that have been subjected to that review. We have not yet heard any findings on that, but I think that's where Director Lingo's question comes from is, if through that process, if they find a negative adjustment, then how will we work through that? So if we have the authority to handle it, they may ask us to take portion of that now. Otherwise, it'll probably take a multi-year approach depending on how large that adjustment could be.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
We'll just follow up on that a little bit. So what we're doing now with special ed expenses and revenue to cover them, what we're doing now would seem to be, I have corrected any mistakes that were made in the near past.
Yeah, we didn't identify anything substantial that we reported back with. Lucas, do you remember the exact number that we identified through that?
About 300,000, wasn't it?
We had flagged a couple $100,000 of expenditures in that special ed. And so, again, not extreme, but there was some that I believe we noted that it could have been coded elsewhere, or potentially should have been coded elsewhere, but nothing that reached into the millions that would cause an adjustment to that end. Now, if they find something else, like on a whole scale approach that they feel is inappropriately coded to special ed, then we'd be in the situation Director Lingo's talking about. Okay. They give you enough time.
We initially submitted our report to the state, and they came back with ones they wanted to look at further and then do a double check on. And so that's what the superintendent's talking about. Of that, if it was about 3 million worth of expenditures they wanted more data on, we came back with that. What was that number, Luke? Still not enough time. About 300 that over the last 3 or 4 years, we didn't have a record of, or went back and said, we don't have something that would say it was coded to that.
Yeah.
So the indication in the back and forth is all we have to go on right now about what that number or that adjustment is that they're looking at, because that's all the information they've given us so far.
So I'm just trying to understand our process. We're looking at mainly a documentation lack as opposed to incorrect coding on our part. Is that fair?
I think both. I mean, we've had to justify both, you know, if there was some that didn't have enough documentation, or if, of course, we would have identified something that was inappropriately coded, made that adjustment. I think the biggest risk to us on it is if there's a philosophical shift on something. You know, if it's something that we would have said, you know, special ed, this is an appropriate expenditure, but if the SBRC has a philosophical shift about that's not something that can be coded to special ed, that's where I think you'd see a more sizable adjustment happen.
The total we have from the 3 fiscal years is about just over 143,000.
Oh, okay.
Any additional questions or comments? And it sounds like we're okay with considering option 1, or, okay. All right, thank you so much. Next up, we will have the interim Chief Financial Officer report by Kim Michael Lee. Or, no, I'm sorry, Kim Lee Michael. Oh, Michael Lee. Okay, sorry. It's been a long night already.
That's right order.
There we go.
Well, it's been a long evening.
Yeah.
Some of the things have already been talked about, so I'm gonna probably zoom in on a couple areas. Is we've had a lot of talk about the audit, so I wanted to kind of give you an update as of today where we stand on fiscal 24 audit. We are told that we should have the draft report no later than May 15th, so that I think is very good news. So with that, we'll have the draft financials from there. The staff will begin working on the 25 audit requests and things like that. We're anticipating at this time to be on the auditor's schedule for August 10th for field work to be in office. We had looked at July, trying to move it ahead a little bit, but looking at some of the other obligations that we have committed to, we're looking at keeping the August 10th date. With that, for FY25, if we keep the August 10th date, we're looking at getting an audit draft report by October 31st. So that should help a lot of the issues that you guys were just talking about. So I kind of wanted to lay that out because that's the timetable that we're discussing with them. And then to further go in that same direction, then the FY26 audit would be on their docket to begin that in either late December or early January, with the final audit report by March 31st of 27, which gets you within the 18 months, actually 17 months for everything. So I think you kind of would move to that direction, so you would be, in compliance.
what's the normal time that it should take between the close of the, I know, right? That's normal. It's all relative. But like, as a board, what's a reasonable amount of time moving forward that we should expect an audit to take? So like, if, say everything was normal and fiscal year closes in June, when should we expect to see the final audit for fiscal year 26?
I would say between 4 to 6 months.
Okay.
That's given, there's a lot of variations to that, staffing could be one of them for the auditors, because they have other clients as well too, so we have to get on their schedule. So there's a lot of discussion because everyone's trying to get on the same schedule. So the sooner we get in, because right now with some of these dates that I just discussed too, they're still trying to meet the obligations with their other clients, with their audits too. So we're just trying to get 3 years done here while other people are trying to get 1 done. So, and then with some of the policy changes that were discussed earlier as well too, we've been making a lot of progress with that, I would say significant to that realm. In there has been language put into your policies that your auditors within 6 months of the close of your fiscal year will present the report. You should be hearing from your auditors, not only your staff, but the auditors who actually did the audit. So it should be an audit partner or somebody like that coming forward and talking with you, and also with any audit findings. Then staff can, give you their recommendations and how they're going to fix things going forward too. But if you get the auditors in here and it's on your schedule, within 6 months, then you've got an outside body reporting on your financials, and that gives you some comfort. So I think that's the direction that you wanted to move into. So
So to follow up a little bit on Lisa's question, so as I understand it, in terms of when we get an audit for us done, it depends in part upon our staff's ability to work quickly. And then it also depends upon the auditor's schedule too. Is that fair?
that's fair, and I'll expand on that a little bit for you. With some of the changes that we've made, instead of trying to get everything done at year end, which is not practical and not timely for financials, by the monthly end reconciliations getting complete, your bank statements being complete, all those tasks being done at the end of every month, you know, within 15 to 20 days after the close of the month. I'll give them some leeway there because they're going to be getting used to this. If you're doing those things timely, when you get to the end of the year for the audit, then a lot of your tasks that they're trying to do now have already been completed, and then they can be working on more of the year-end audit reconciliations and the paperwork and pulling the documents that the auditors are requesting and things like that.
Okay, great, thanks.
Okay. I'll keep going. I'm going to stay on the audit topic here and so you've talked about one of the findings from the 23 audit was the fixed assets were being done manually, and it's been an ongoing finding, you know, that's been in your report. With that, SU, your financial system, whether it's good or bad, it does have the module for the fixed assets in there. So starting May and June, there's going to be meetings and planning to get that to roll out, to begin using the fixed asset module as intended, and to be in compliance with audits going forward, to start utilizing that program and loading everything in the system starting July 1. So that's just moving you even another step and will eventually eliminate that finding. So.
Will that then sort of complete the list of things that like our team internally needs to just kind of do on a monthly basis? I mean, one of the things I know you've been working on is just setting up better systems for going forward, and so like, is that the last piece then, from your view, of those processes that should just be standard procedure every month?
There's always more.
Okay.
There's always more to refine, to make improvements,
okay.
but that's a big one. That's a big piece.
Okay.
Yes. Because like that's a big piece. I think you've seen me talk about the grant reporting. That's been a big piece that we've been working on since I came. And I think that has been leaps and bounds made. Now we have one landing page, one document that houses all the grants in there, the application, all the information about when reports are due, the reports themselves, when they're prepared, those are being linked in there. Everything to do with that grant, when it was received, the award letter, everything is in there. So everything will be housed in one place. The reconciliations will be in one place. So the month-end reconciliation can be done in one place. Your CFA can be utilized with that report and be, instead of it taking months to complete, you should be able to do it in a matter of weeks. So that's another process improvement.
Thank you.
Those are my big things. So I'm not sure what other information or questions you have. But I did notice something else on the board leadership update report that I just wanted to mention as I saw it in the very bottom. It said here, at the conclusion of the FY 24-25 audits, the board will hire an independent, sorry, I forgot my glasses, to prepare a forensic audit. At this time, I would not recommend you doing that. I don't think that that's gonna be necessary. I think that just the regular audits and all the internal work that we've been doing has been we've been going through a lot of that stuff, and I don't think you need a forensic audit at this point. And if you did, I would tell you, but at this point, I would say that you don't. That's all I have.
The one question, you mentioned proper AR aging is not properly done. What does that mean and why is it important?
Why is it important?
Yeah, what is it, first of all, and then?
Accounts receivable.
Oh, accounts
Is that
receivable.
same
Okay,
thing?
that's.
Yeah.
Strs.
Yeah, you should have a regular, just like AP and AR, you should have a regular aging report, so that's being worked on right now too.
I just didn't know the acronym, so.
Yeah. So that's part of the process improvements.
Yeah.
Even, like, there's always more room for that.
Are you coming back for the May 12th meeting?
Yes,
Will
I
you
will be
okay.
here.
Then we don't need to say goodbye to you
No,
tonight.
I will be here. I
Well,
will be here.
My next question was how much overlap, like how long will you be here after our new CFO starts?
So we just talked about this today a little bit, and one thing that we had, first that I'll start with, that Kim and I had our wires crossed on a little bit. She does have the third quarter financial report done, but we always have done that as a standalone agenda item, so we didn't include it for this meeting, but we will include it for May 12th, and she'll deliver that quarterly financial report. With that said, Pat starts the day after that meeting. She starts on May 13th. So ideally, we're going to have them spend some time together the afternoon of the 12th, before Pat's official first day, a little bit of the morning of the 13th, Pat's first day, and then the next Tuesday when Kim is back on the 19th, that they would have that data overlap as well. Obviously, they'll be in communication during that time too. Kim's just physically in the office that one day a week. So we have a nice little runway there. And then Kim and I have been talking about when that final report can be delivered, and that'll probably happen at that second meeting in June, just based on her schedule that we'd have that delivery. So she won't stay working with us every day or throughout all those weeks, but by the time she can have her last day, that, what is it, the 25th? And then we'll turn around that report there sometime in June.
Second meeting in June?
Yeah.
Okay. So we are having a second meeting in June.
Well, sorry, thank you. Yes, we talked about that.
Okay.
I didn't probably make that clear. That was, I think it must have came up at Ed Committee that we were talking about a second meeting in June. I think we probably need to, just based on the amount of things that we have coming at us. So I was going to mention that in agenda setting, but yeah, cat's out of the bag. So yeah.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thanks.
So that takes us to the board leadership financial document. And as CFO Michael Lee pointed out, that new bullet point was suggested by Director Lingo, but that was language that
I suggested
asked.
it because legal suggested it to us. So I don't know what the.
We could change it to, instead of will, may consider.
May is fine.
That's good. Okay. All right.
Just point out where the language change is in the document.
It's at the very last bullet point.
Okay.
So currently it reads at the conclusion of the fiscal year 24-25 audits. And instead of the board will, may consider.
Okay, great. That just clarifies it a little bit. Thanks.
All right. That takes up.
I just have one question, sorry.
Yeah.
I know we're going to talk about this in one of the next items, but I was looking at, on page 2, the board in the middle, the board will engage in a multi-stage approach to obtaining and sustaining financial health and stability. Because we have identified the need to do a fairly rigorous review of FMP 2.3 and prioritization, I am proposing that we consider adding that as a stage to that. I know maybe 4, because I know, or I don't know. I think we have some conversation to have about that, when that prioritization can happen and analysis can happen.
I would even say maybe it's part of stage 2.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it needs to happen in tandem.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
And then, as long as we're talking about timelines, do we have any better idea about when we're going to be looking at the organizational chart and right-sizing some of our administrator positions? Yeah, I guess that's my question. And the only other thing I wanted to bring up at this time was what we talked about in P&G today, was just increasing the board's visibility of the administrator contracts before the board approves those contracts.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, so good question, Director Finch. We had talked about potentially this meeting or that first meeting in May coming back with the org chart. Obviously, we have some open positions right now that are influencing some of that movement, and so I've been hesitant to bring you an org chart that's going to change, a week later. So I would like to think we'd have some of that solidified by that first meeting in May. So I think we can put that in agenda setting as a potential topic. The only thing, again, would be impacted if for some reason we saw another piece of movement that would influence, but we know we need to go down to FTE on that central office team.
Anything else related to that document?
Oh, and then your other point, Director Finch, we talked about in P&G, but maybe just to highlight for the regular meeting too, is that the admin contract piece, making sure the board has information about any contract changes to admin during kind of a wrap-up exempt session, which is where we typically look at language changes for other groups, making sure that any changes done to the administrative contracts are also included as part of that exempt session.
All right. And that takes us to item number 4 in discussion, which is the communication plan that was raised at our last meeting and suggested and agreed upon by the majority of us at the board table. And Director Horn-Frazier actually took the lead on this communication plan that we see attached to the board doc. And instead of summarizing it for her, I will let her.
Thank you. Some of the feedback that we've received is just that it may be helpful to have more direct communication between the directors and the community. And one way that we've talked about doing that is to have a couple of elements, one being a series of videos that we would record following meetings, hopefully not at 11 o'clock at night. And the logistics of that need to be worked out. But the gist of it is to, or the idea is to create a short video, 2 to 5 minutes maximum, that highlights key points from the meeting. I thought that Director Williams, you had a really excellent summary of the nature of the unique nature of school district finance that might be a useful thing to include in a video like that, because that's a hard thing for anybody to understand. And it's very helpful when we're working through a budget crisis. So having the opportunity to share high points from the meeting to supplement what is available already with the complete video of the meeting and other things that are available online. We talked about creating a landing page where all of the videos and any other supplemental documentation could be stored, but also posting those to social media would provide another opportunity for some interaction with the community and to gain some insight into what questions and observations our community has in response to those videos. So that would be something that people who are interested in participating could kind of rotate through, everybody take a turn. There are some good examples with the school board at in Cedar Rapids, and those are done typically by 1 or 2 directors following meetings, and they're real low tech, informal, and but that's just one idea for how we might improve our engagement with the community.
Director Horn-Fraser, I really appreciate you taking this on. I do think that we need to do a better job of communicating out to the community what we are doing. I'm not sure that a video is the best way to do that, and there's several reasons for that. I don't know that all of us would be kind of willing to do that, to stay here after a long meeting like this, 5 hours long, and also involving our PR department. I'm not sure that might be a little tricky. But more so, what I would like to see is a written communication. Number one, because I think it's more accessible. We could take, for example, Kim's minutes and put it into AI and put it into a SMORE. I believe it was Director Rossler. He's probably gone by now. Still here. Is he still here?
Behind the pylon.
There he is. I remember when he was on the board, there was a SMORE newsletter that went out for the board a few times, and then I think it stopped because of COVID. But I believe SMORE has a built-in auto translation. So my concern about the video is that it's not translated, and it's not as accessible for our parents that speak multiple languages. And so I think a written form that could be translated into multiple languages might be more accessible. And also, it's just, I think, more accessible for anyone because it's faster to skim a written form rather than watching a video. So, I really like your idea of summarizing what we're doing to keep the community more informed. So thank you.
Yeah, and do you think that that's something that you would like to see rotated among directors in the same way? I know that one thing that we had talked about, President Malone and I talked about the desire to kind of make sure that whatever goes out is representative of the board as a whole in this case, since it is like a board communication, and so to have a review essentially before it goes out on social media or wherever it is.
That's why I think the written form would be better if we took a non-biased view from our minutes that Kim takes, which are extremely thorough. And I don't know if this is possible, Kim, but if we put that into AI and generated, a newsletter after, sometime after the board meeting, that could then be on the website, or you could email it out through a SMORE communication.
One of the goals of this approach is to have a wider reach than we may through our email systems, and so any interested community member who is not necessarily in our systems already can access through social media, can access through the website, and so thinking about that.
You can put the SMORE on our website and in social media, right?
It's not a thing that I'm familiar with how it works at this point, so
I like the idea of, I like both ideas of sort of combining the newsletter with the video, because there's some people that, I don't know, take in information easier by reading it, or some that's more visual and having that video, kind of like that, because then you still get the accurate representation of what happened at the board meeting, but it's also that visual piece. And I know there's a issue with translation, but I thought most videos, I mean, do videos have like subtitles you could pick in language?
I don't have that answer, but I know they have closed captioning, but language selection I'm not positive about.
Yeah, let's look into that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
and
they think that would be helpful to see if that's for us to be able to do that.
And Director Finch, I'm with you. I am a person who prefers to read rather than watch a video. However, I also know that there are a lot of people who are not like me, and I'm also looking for. I'm interested in finding fairly immediate ways to connect while it's fresh in people's minds, and so we can understand what people took away, and in less time, just so we can understand what the concerns and questions remaining are. And so I think we have a lot of good stuff to work with to go back and just kind of go back to refining and coming up with something else. So I'm happy to keep working on that and see if we can come up with something that works.
I commend all of you for putting the effort into doing this. It's something new, and it may actually be popular with the community. I do agree with Director Finch's comments and President Malone too about translation. That's really a key thing, and I know we want to do that. Not quite so sure how I would do with doing a video. I'll have to see about that.
Thank you.
Any additional comments? All right. Then that takes us to the staff reporting tool. Superintendent Degner.
Yeah, I don't have a lot here, but we did want to put something in front of you this evening. So thank you to Kristen Brady and Janet Bejo-Parker, our ombuds, for helping think through an idea here about how we could do a staff anonymous reporting tool. And so you see a screenshot here of how the tool would present. There's also contact information for the ombuds, to the to the whistleblower protection group, and then also the Iowa Civil Rights Commission for retaliation based on discrimination. So we also list some other state resources there along with the tool. So we wanted to provide that to you tonight for your feedback. It is not yet live, but if it's something you want us to go ahead with, we sure can do that. Responses to the form would go into the ombuds. Generally, when Janet and I have met about concerns coming to her, we look for themes or patterns, unless somebody takes her guidance on about how they can follow up with a specific concern. And so, again, anonymous reports, we deal with those also in the Say Something, See Something tool that gets submitted to us. And if we have enough information to investigate, we're able to follow up on those anonymous reports, and then other times there's even some thematic things that we're able to address. So those would be a few high-level things I'd share, and then happy to answer any questions or take any feedback or adjust according to your thoughts.
Matt, do you think that the ombuds person, Janet, can both take concerns and keep them confidential and anonymous, and provide feedback or results from something that may happen because of her reporting back to the person who's making the reports? Is that something the ombuds can do?
Yeah, and at some point we could even have Janet back to talk through her approach, but I think she's done a very thorough job of making sure she's stood up her office in our district according to those International Ombuds Association standards and the protocols. She doesn't even have an office at this facility. She works off-site, for a layer protection. And so, you know, we have a lot of appropriate barriers and protections to make sure that employees feel safe to come report those concerns, and then that, you know, there are multiple options on how they could either follow up or decide not to follow up on that concern. So the anonymity part with me, you know, I've had some experience of working with her now. I think she takes very seriously, and I feel like we've had a good opportunity to work through a lot of those scenarios. And then also, just like I said, about sharing back some thematic concerns so that our organization can try to improve. And you guys have seen that in her annual reports that come back, that if we do have a consistent area of concern, an area that we can try to address that through another way if the individual concern isn't something that person wanted pursued. So the easy answer to your question, I think, is yes, Charlie, but that's some additional context.
Okay, thank you.
How often would the ombuds be reporting to the board about these concerns? I think that was the idea, is that the board would have more visibility on what the concerns are and if there were themes. So, you know, right now we get a yearly report from our ombuds, but I would be wanting to have more frequent reporting and more board visibility on these issues.
Yeah, I think that's up to you guys about how often you'd like to have that back. If it was monthly, quarterly, you know, I might suggest quarterly first rather than trying to turn them around on a month-by-month basis. But it'd be up to you guys.
That's why I brought my microphone forward, was to suggest quarterly, more than just once a year.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
All quarterly reports from the ombuds person instead of just once a year.
Could be somewhat in tandem a little bit, you know, rather than just her annual report. She could report on things that she's seeing, actually reported to her office, and then she could also have a data point around these. You could do some quarterly check-ins that way.
So, do you anticipate any issues with her being able to manage if there's all of a sudden an increased volume of reports?
Potentially. I mean, yeah, if we get a number of them. But I also don't think she's the one investigating those concerns when they come in, right? I mean, she's basically the facilitator, or letting people know the options. And so if there's something that's concerning that needs to be investigated, Janet's not the investigator. So that would be handed off to the appropriate party to investigate. So that would, you know, that probably is the other side of the equation, Ruthina, that yes, if there was a lot, yes, that could put some increased pressure on her workload. But at the same time, I don't think it's her sole responsibility to navigate the concern.
How often are outside investigators brought into things? I'm not trying to do a gotcha. I'm just genuinely wondering, because some of the things that I hear as feedback is that they don't trust people within this building to do investigations versus having someone from the outside come in. I don't know how that typically works, or does it work, or.
I wouldn't say there's like a typical approach to it, Director Lingo. I would say, you know, we've used outside investigators for sure, especially if there's a conflict, or somebody's conflicted, that would be responsible for the investigation. So it's an approach we've used, but I wouldn't say it happens on a regular basis or anything in that regard. You know, there is and Nick's not here to talk through it, Chase, maybe you have enough depth of knowledge, but for example, the legislative change where now if we get a complaint of abuse, it gets kicked right to DHS, and we have to put the employee on leave. So that's become a more regular, you know, outside investigator if we have an event that presents that way rather than an internal investigation. Did I say all that correctly?
You did. You said that correct. That went into effect last school year. The other thing we've done is maybe we'd call it a hybrid approach where we've done the investigation internally, but then we've had an external party review the findings to double check it, especially if there's been an appeal or something of that nature.
I know, I'm just trying to wrap my head around the investigation part, because hypothetically, I mean, not hypothetically, this actually did happen. The person is no longer employed in our district, but if a report came in that a staff person said, I was told that I'm too scary and to calm students down, if I started class by singing and dancing, that would be better. And oh, by the way, I'm a black man. How do we investigate that? Or do we do anything, or just say, oh, that's kind of crappy?
Well, I think when we have negative or concerning things reported on the See Something, Say Something tool, we first see if there's enough information to try to follow up. You know, if that individual is not leaving their name, not identifying a campus, you know, all of those things start to limit our ability to actively follow up and pursue it. It's a concerning experience that person's reporting. I think some level of concern we need to think about through this too, you know, just for your awareness as a board. I anticipate that we'll get much more of these from building interactions. Will be a lot of our submissions. It'll be building staff and how they're interacting with each other than it will be about their experience with district staff, just because we have a lot more building staff and we have a lot more people in our buildings, right, than we have for intersection points here. So that's kind of a side note, but I think President Malone, your question's really answered with, it's dependent upon how much information we have, our ability to follow up effectively.
But to that point, I don't want to totally discount the value of this, right?
Sure.
Like if we got a comment like that maybe some sort of administrator is making, then maybe like we can add to administrative PD, like appropriate things and not appropriate things to say to the people that work in your bill. I mean, there are
It's
ways.
like the theme thing, right, Director
Yeah.
Williams? Like if we get a bunch of concerns about racist treatment of staff, well, that's an obvious theme that we would need to address and try to work in
Yeah.
a larger scale effort in the district, right?
So we might not be able to like target a specific person because we don't know
Who
that is, but it has some value in that we might be able, if we see a concern that we can address through training or information or something like that to our administrators, that it's a path that we can use.
So thank you for listing the state agencies, the whistleblower. I'm wondering, are you intending this to be our whistleblower system here for the district? Because I would imagine that if there is a whistleblower complaint that we would want to know about it before we had our staff approach the state about it, right? That's kind of the whole idea of this, is that so that we can take steps to, for corrective action, to intervene. So will this be a sort of advertised as a whistleblower system, or is it just purely just a complaint? I guess how are we promoting this?
Yeah, I mean, I think the way, trying to see if I get the terminology correct here, probably somewhat open-ended. I mean, we've referred to it as staff anonymous reporting tool. I think ultimately the language is up to you guys. If you feel that's important, I feel like it's serving a dual purpose there. Director Finch, a lot of reports could come in through this, so it's probably somewhat of a, I'm struggling for a word, but it serves several purposes, right, about these complaints that could come in. So I think the purpose of putting those other resources on there is, what if they're still not comfortable reporting something through this tool, that they still are aware of their other options. So I feel like we have a lot of good options in place, especially if we add this in the district, for people to pursue concerns, and for people to expect some follow-up for us, for sure.
And I just want to make sure that if our staff do bother to make a complaint, that it will be addressed and it won't be dropped or lost in the system, so that they don't lose trust in this system. So if there is a large volume, do you think that our ombuds is able to take all of that on? Do you have any concerns about that?
Yeah, it was kind of like what we were talking about before. I think that, again, we won't expect Janet to investigate those. If somebody leaves their information for follow-up, she's been great about making sure to follow up with that individual. And I think it's also somewhat hard to predict, with what we'll get for anonymous information. I think that's the thing where I'm trying to just not express any resistance to it, but make sure we understand our limitations, right? That if it's an anonymous report and there's limited information, our ability to follow up with that person, while we can consider it again for those themes or problems, we also don't want to give them the perception that that everything's going to be able to be identified in their concern if we don't have enough information to follow up on. I also was sitting here thinking about, in the ICA folks in the back of the room, there's some good opportunity for us to share feedback we're getting from this with ICA leadership, from a theme-based thing too, not only you guys, but our different groups in the organization, for issues that we might want to be able to address or work on as well, so.
I would hesitate in us referring to this as a whistleblower system. Whistleblower is a legal term of art, and then it also follows with whistleblower protection. If it's an anonymous complaint, you cannot be considered a whistleblower, because the whole point of whistleblower protection is that people know that you've complained. And so I wouldn't want people to think that if they anonymously report something, they will get whistleblower protection, because that's not how it works.
Right.
Now, if they
Yeah.
left their information, you know, if it's not anonymous, if they go above and beyond, then that they could be implicated with protections. But I don't want people to think that if they make a complaint, they're anonymous, we don't know who they are, then somehow they've now fallen into this protected class of people, because that's not it. I don't want them to think that.
No, that's very true, yeah. So that's why the directions to the other sources, or the other resources is important. Yeah.
And maybe to address the concern about, well, what if the system is swamped? Maybe we could just request that, you know, after a month of it being live, we just get a very simple count, or you know, some way to
Like
just
an
kind of
update.
and kind of track that
Yeah,
for
we can
first
do a
more
review and
closely for the
adjust if
first
needed.
few months, and then decide.
I like that. Any additional questions or comments regarding this?
We'll probably activate right away then if you
Good.
guys are.
All right, thank you. Next up is the Facilities Master Plan Resolution, and Directors Finch and Lingo had requested this to be on the agenda, so I will turn it over to them if they have comments that they would like to make.
This Facility Master Plan Resolution had put together, it's more in response to the questions, emails on ICCSD's budget issues. The resolution places a pause on facility spending by the board and under the board's discretion, though the administration said that there is a pause. The resolution will allow current FMP construction to continue, but place hard stop on FMP projects that are not currently under construction. Stop would end by a board resolution when the district is financially able, or when the board agrees that the district is financially stable. Given that there'll be limited funding and opportunities, I mean, the FMP 2.3 was 105 million. We heard earlier today that even with PEPL, it was somewhere between 40 and 60 million that could be bonded out. I mean, even when we look at, so it's not a whole lot of money. And I mean, when you bond out, you have to pay interest, so you have to be good with that as well. The resolution would require a full accounting of needs and priorities and a justification why certain projects are considered higher need than others. Which is something that has not been done in my mind while I've sat on the board. I will touch on this again because the resolution includes it, but any changes to the elementary model and any classrooms needed for that, I mean, you can look up the how much it costs for a classroom on average. It's somewhere between $300,000 to $700,000 per classroom. But we need to have an idea in there. While this pause may not be popular with everyone, but Jane, Director Finch, and I believe that every facility project is a priority to someone. It's fundamental belief that those voices also need to be heard because the money is limited. A lot of promises were made, but the money simply will not be there. So it's up for the board to determine which projects should be placed ahead of one another, and if that's what the board decides, then so be it. But you know, in our mind, these discussions should really take place after we know what our finances are and having accurate cash balances across all funds, a clear timeline for how much money is expected to be spent for each year, how much money we actually have to spend, and a discussion with the community and at the board table on which projects are priorities. So with that, Director Finch, do you want to add anything, or?
No, I don't have anything to add.
Okay.
I'll start. So I think this is already what we're doing. So if we want to pass something that says we're already doing this, that's fine. I don't have a problem with this. I have a problem with a couple things that I think we can solve, or Kurt can tell me that I'm wrong and that they're not problems. But
Kurt takes a deep breath.
my first problem is with the second paragraph about projects that are in step 7 through 9. And I think everyone saw, I asked to get an understanding of what projects were going to be impacted. So my understanding, right, is when you get to step 7, we have a contract in place. There's a bid that's been accepted, we have a contract in place, we have a contractor doing work, and then we are legally obligated to follow the terms of that contract. And so if the board starts saying, oh, no, I'm concerned that if we start pausing and interfering with projects that are at step 7 through 9, we are going to violate the terms of the contracts and our promises that we've made to these entities that are doing work on our buildings. And that's going to get us into legal trouble.
Yes, but each of those contracts does have a stipulation that we can terminate the contract with proper notification. Okay. And then obviously, you know, if something's going on already and the contractor's already purchased materials that aren't able to be returned, we have to go forward with those. So we have had some of those instances where we've stopped things that were in construction, some minor projects that were in that case that we have done that already. So we've already kind of exercised that for what we felt at the time was prudent. Some projects, as you all know, they're 98% of the way to being complete. It made more sense to finish the project rather than stop it where it was.
Yeah, so we have 14 projects that are between step 7 and step 9, and 8 of those, more than 50% of them, are on step 9. And as I read board policy 707-5G1, step 9 is final punch list, and then step 10 is payment. So I have some real grave concerns about mucking with anything at step 9 because we're so far down the road that really what we're saying is we're not going to pay you right now. And I don't think that we can, I just don't think that's a good idea for the work is 98% done. We're doing final punch lists. We need to pay the people who we promised to pay to do the work that's done. And then the other 6 projects are in step 7, but they're also, just so that everybody knows, there's things like the Wickham HVAC system. I mean, they're or the Northwest retaining wall. I mean, these are, again, projects that we have contractors working on that seem like we need to do. So one of the things that I was wondering is if there would be, if the majority of the board would consider the idea of just taking that second paragraph out, and that this resolution doesn't impact the 14 projects that are on step 7 through 9, that those have to finish.
It does say that work may continue through the completion of the current step, but
right,
the advancement to the next just requires a board approval.
But step 9, step 10 is payment. So why do we need board approval to pay on a contract that is completed and that we've agreed to? I mean, we can't not pay our vendors.
But we do that. That's part of what we do through the consent agenda when we get to those steps, correct? That's the board approval right there.
So why do we need to put it in here if we're doing it?
For good times.
I don't think we should do resolutions for good times.
No, it's there to just assure the public that we are going to follow through with this. It's for transparency and to build trust. Because trust is something that has been totally lacking lately in our district and in this process. Part of the reason I brought this is because we're having a discussion in the public where the public out there is being told that there's been a $14 million commitment by the school district to this project, or to a project. And there has been, this filters in the next one, the next item, and why I put it in there is that they're saying that administration have guaranteed it, and then several board members have guaranteed it. So, that's part of this, is just to build trust, to have the transparency there.
Well, if this is about the pool, then make a resolution about the pool. And the pool's in a step 1 through 6 phase, which I think we all don't have a problem with step 1 through 6, saying we're pausing everything. No one has a problem saying to the public, we're not considering any of that. I'm seeing almost everyone's head shake. So what we shouldn't do is put bad language in a resolution to solve a different problem. Like, when they finish step 9 of the Lemmy HVAC system, we should pay the guys that fixed the Lemmy HVAC system. Like, that's step 10. We have to. It's not a like, we have to pay for the work that we asked to be done.
And we approve that by approving the consent agenda, right?
Correct.
Okay.
So-
So is there any problem with just putting that out into the regular agenda, just so that there's a little bit more visibility, since things are kind of tight right now? I mean, we created a policy in the last couple of years of when something surpassed a certain threshold amount, that would then be put out into the regular board agenda for higher visibility. So is there any reason why we can't just put that into the regular board agenda for higher visibility?
I mean, I think it might be confusing that we have some sort of choice in paying the bill. I mean, I don't see us having a choice. Do you know what I mean? When we pull it out and we vote on something, it all suggests that we have a choice in voting yes or no.
So when things are in Appendix 9,
yes,
we don't have a choice.
No,
Is that what you're saying? When
no,
things are in Appendix 9,
that's not
we
what
don't
I'm
have
saying.
a
But when we
choice?
visibly put them
Yeah.
in the voting, I think it makes it seem, when we pull it out of Appendix 9, that it's more of a live issue that we all need to decide
'Cause
on.
I guess I'll remind everybody that that's how we approved the $65 million middle schools that we built, was by putting it in Appendix 9.
Listen, if we want to talk about that, we're going to be here all night. My concern is that we have to pay.
You don't need to deflect.
People.
You don't need to deflect.
You
because
just deflected
that's
by
part
talking
of,
about
that's
Oh
part
my
of the
goodness.
reason.
Stay on
That's
that.
part of
I'm
the
done.
reason
No, I'm
to
done.
put it on the regular board agenda, because we have a history of tucking things away in Appendix 9 for approval. $65 million worth of middle schools that no one knew we were voting on because it was hidden in Appendix 9 rather than being out in the regular board agenda. There is precedent for this. So this is part of the reason why we have brought this resolution.
I will tell you, part of my reason is because we came to on a Thursday to give $2 million to the Junior Achievement Dream Accelerator. The public had Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, 5 days to discuss that. 5 days.
I'm going to push.
This
Sorry, I thought you were
is
done.
to put it in a spot so everybody sees, here's our projects. This is what we can do. Let's find some metrics to agree on, to prioritize the projects, to make sure other people's voices are heard throughout the process, to bring the community in, to help make a plan, to bring in the community. And it's providing transparency.
I'm just going to push back on your time frame with the Junior Achievement Dream Accelerator, because we talked about that for months and months and months and months, and the budget was always part of that conversation. But that being said, again, that's my concern, is with the second paragraph. And then my understanding too is this doesn't attach and Kirk, correct me if I'm wrong, but our life cycle budget is completely separate from the facility master plan.
Yes, but those are typically also approved within the Appendix 9
Correct.
report.
But so this only deals, this resolution, and I'm comfortable with that, but this resolution only addresses our facility master plan projects that have to follow this process. But with that, again, I'm happy to pass this if we can take out the second paragraph and with the understanding it doesn't impact life cycle budget items.
I second I shouldn't use that terminology, but I support that position, because I feel it would be a bigger breach of trust to not pay on work that is done. And I am absolutely not comfortable entertaining that possibility. And I want the district to be viewed as an entity that pays its debts. And so I support the removal of that stipulation. I do appreciate the drive for transparency. I think that's critical, and I think some of the other examples are excellent examples of where that should have been more. But in this particular instance, I support removing paragraph 2. If it's okay to bring up one other point, I would like to go on paragraph 4. There is the statement that this resolution shall remain in effect until the board determines that the district has achieved sufficient financial stability. And that seems too subjective to me to be very useful.
I left it open for discussion.
Yeah, and so I would propose that we either attach certain tasks to be accomplished by that time, like we finish certain audits, or we, I would like to see something more concrete that's not going to be open to interpretation quite so much for that. And then I guess I'm going to tie back my last comment to a comment that I made with respect to our board financial leadership update, which is to attach an anticipated time frame, not specific, but to show that this is not a thing we're going to leave hanging indefinitely, but rather we're going to attach it to these tasks that are completed, or however we get those metrics, and then make it part of our process, our stages for moving forward. Because as you both pointed out, every project on the list matters to different people, and we do not want to leave anybody hanging unnecessarily. So those are my suggestions.
President Malone. I agree with Lisa's point about paragraph 2, and I think this document can be implemented to accomplish the things that I think the directors Lingo and Finch are interested in accomplishing. And I am too, actually. I think it's very good for the board to have an explicit process for approving capital projects and then pursuing them as finances permit. And I also agree with Director Horn-Fraser about the last paragraph, making better definitioning there, I think would help us. I certainly am not personally interested in getting us in the position of potentially voting not to fulfill a contract. That's just, for one thing, that wouldn't happen. Then we would eventually be turned away from that course of action. So I'm okay with my
Again,
comments.
we vote on this no matter what. It's in Appendix 9. And when we vote on the consent agenda, we vote to approve those steps. We always vote to approve those steps, whether it's in the consent agenda or whether it's out on the regular board agenda.
Having it in this document is not changing the process. It's just there for.
Well, could we change the process?
If you really want,
That's fine.
Yeah.
My one comment was the same as Director Horn-Fraser, was the 4th paragraph. The subjectivity of the sufficient financial stability and adding metrics like having the completion of the audits. We heard tonight that we would get an update in June, like a better financial forecasting from PFM regarding our balances in PEPL and SAVE, things like that, I think would help sort of set metrics that we know that we're working towards.
So what are your thoughts on metrics tonight, or are you
The
saying
audits, the updated forecasting for SAVE and PEPL. I mean, those are things that.
No, I'm just thinking through how to add
Yeah.
that in, but not making it too encumbering, because if you say we're waiting until fiscal 27, or not fiscal 27, but fiscal year 26 audit, or fiscal year 25, yeah, that's the. So, Molly, go ahead.
Oh, I don't have much to say, but I I mean, I don't, paragraph 2, I mean, we vote on it anyway. I think this kind of muddies the water a little bit. It feels, I don't know, but as you say, we vote on those things anyway. But yeah, we just need to firm up what financial stability, and then to resume capital projects responsibly. I mean, that also is kind of, I think we just need to make more specific what that means. But, yeah.
Director Lynch, I was just gonna say, we could, I wouldn't mind just kind of exploring what that looks like with you too, because I think there'll probably be some things that, you know, there may be an approach where you want to do pay as you go, and then there's going to be a later timeline before you would ever have that conversation about borrowing to accomplish any of those projects. And so there might be just some different considerations that you want to build in there about at what time do you feel like you have an appropriate fund balance for those capital projects, and at what other time would you consider a longer range plan that would be contingent on borrowing. And then the one question I might ask is if, when you were talking about estimated cost, number of students impacted, written justification, is maybe not rankings of the projects. I think that could create some heartache for us just in the community a little bit about ranking. You know, does a fine arts project go ahead of a sports project, and I don't think that's the intent, but just knowing, you know, what is that correct language right in there, because I know what you're trying to get at is, okay, how do we try to determine, you know, what's maybe going to go first, or what's going to even require a larger funding commitment. So again, I understand the intent, but maybe rankings would be something different we look at. And then my other thought on paragraph 2 would be maybe just to use the language of Appendix 9, right? Just to say may work through their completion of their current step through the Appendix 9 process. Something as simple as that to take your guys' feedback for a suggestion.
Unfortunately, ranking is kind of what we have to do now, though, because we have a finite amount of, we have somewhere between 40 and 60 to work with, and we have over $100 million in projects sitting there. And on top of that, we also have to worry about any reconfiguration issues. So no matter what, something is going to be a lower ranked project in the end, because the money's just not there. It's a project that could be reapproached years down the road with a general obligation bond, or years down the road when SAVE is at an area where we can do something with it. But I mean, that's why I'm going with on ranking, is that we're gonna have to prioritize, right? And that's kind of where we're at right now.
No, I understand, and that's what I was agreeing.
Yeah, and
I'm trying
I
to
know
agree with
people
you on
are,
it. Like, I do, yeah, obviously you have to have a prioritized list, and then, you know, timeline's gonna be part of that order of prioritization too, right? And so, just maybe some continued thought about flexibility on that.
I mean, there may be a project that we can't fund today, but it's a high priority, but 5 years down the road, we have the sufficient flow to do it then. It can still be a number one priority. It doesn't mean that it's number one on that.
I think ranking kind of applies to, we're gonna say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you know, we're gonna put them all in order. And I think we're probably will have high priority projects and, I don't know, something else. So I think it's just what that word implies to people.
Yeah, and I agree with that, Molly. I first thought 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which I don't like that look. I think that pits schools against each other and really divides our community instead of brings us together. But then I thought maybe, you know, high priority need or priority, something like that, or something that's a little less
Critical or.
critical. Yes, critical improvement, something like that.
Does that make sense in regards to what you're thinking, Director?
Yeah.
Like some phrases like
And
that?
no matter what way we're going to put it as high priority, low priority, it's still a ranking, so I don't.
You're still prioritizing.
Yeah, but still, people are gonna be unhappy. That's where we're at right now, and that's the way it's going to be, because things have been prioritized in the past, over the past 5, 10 years. Other areas have been prioritized, and now we're sitting here with limited capacity to what we thought we had last May. And now we have to decide what's broken, what needs to be fixed, what can we afford this year, what can we afford over the next 10 years. It stinks. I don't like it, but it's where we're at. I mean, when I was at a meeting a couple weeks ago, and one of the people there, I just realized my microphone's pretty far away, so I'm sorry if and one of the people said to us that it was someone a lot smarter and a lot more experienced than me. He pointed out that, you know, at some point throughout this process, you're going to have points in time where you've made promises that you can't afford any longer. And you just can't change it. And that's what you're living with, and that's the experience of what it is. And the people don't have to be happy about it, but that's the situation we're in.
So maybe somebody will work on this a little bit and bring it back, and
I'm happy to work on it.
Okay, thank you.
Next up is the Coralville Rec Center. Superintendent Degner, did you want to start us off or comment on, because there's been questions regarding the conversations between the district and district employees, the city of Coralville, as well as having involvement with board members.
Sure. What I can share, I think it's a little bit of what Director Lingo was just talking about, right? We approved a FMP 2.3 plan, and in that plan, there was a financial commitment acknowledged to the city of Coralville to work on a rec center that included a competition pool for the ability for us to split our Combo Liberty West swim team into two different teams, as was envisioned at the inception of Liberty High School. And now, as we've paused some of those FMP 2.3 projects, there's been questions about what that commitment will be. And so what I've shared with Coralville is that we are still partners on the project, and we're continuing to look for a way to continue that commitment. I know that there's probably not universal alignment with the board on that thought, but I really think what we've asked for with them is just some time for us to do the same work we've just been talking about here tonight, to understand what capacity we do have, what are our other needs, and then some decisions. A couple things specific to it, if just to remember that if we're not, I think a part of that project, I think there would have to be conversations with Coralville about what type of pool they are going to build, because I don't think they would probably be building a competition pool. And so then what's that do to our other swim teams, and what are our options for our swim teams if that were to be an arrangement? You guys may say, hey, we can't, after we look at all of our needs, that maybe the funding level can't be sustained in what was originally committed, and then is there an opportunity for us to regroup at that point? But to date, what we've shared is that we're still partners, and we're looking for a way to continue that commitment, and we've just asked them for some time. We've talked to them about June, just like we've talked to you about coming back in June.
So can I circle back and ask a question about something that I just heard? So your understanding is that there's a scenario in which that if we contribute zero money, then Coralville would not incorporate a competition pool into their new natatorium.
I haven't had that conversation with them recently, but I remember on the inception of some of this, that wasn't going to be part of the original plan or portfolio to redesign this rec center.
And part of the rec center design is to get rid of the current rec center.
Correct.
So the old competition pool would go away.
Right, it would be gone.
So without a competition pool, that would end swimming at West and Liberty.
Yeah, we would have to pursue options like the university, which has been a really big struggle, I'm sure, for people familiar with the swim community, that, times to access those university resources are extremely limited. Mercer, would be another option, but we already have a swim team there at City High. It's not geographically convenient for our kids that go to West or Liberty. So we would explore options, before we would do that, but it becomes a lot more complex for sure.
Okay, thanks.
And the timeline for that decision point, I believe, is June for Coralville, correct?
Have they communicated anything specific that way? We've asked for till June to have some space to understand our need, but
Yeah, they've been agreeable to give us to June to figure out what our funding could or could not look like. They're in the middle of design right now, and progressing every day, to be honest. And so if they opt not to build the competition pool, that's a significant change on their end that will kind of set them back a little bit in terms of their timeline, to be honest.
But again, that goes back to finding a way to determine what the priorities are, because 14 million out of 40, that's over 25% of what we have in PEPL. And that's just talking about being able to bond it out. If we're 6% interest, bonding out 14 million, I threw it through ChatGPT just because I did. And that's $18 million or $19 million on a 6% interest rate. So it's like, these are part of the conversations we need to have. And when we pass a resolution and we identify priorities, if that's the priority, then great, that's the priority. But it needs to be upfront and transparent to the community. At least that's my feeling.
Yeah, I'm all for transparency. And towards that end, I personally think that the having this separate swim team for both Liberty and West puts us as a district in having equivalent swim opportunities for all three conventional high schools. And to me, that makes a lot of sense. And whether or not we can financially do that is uncertain at this point anyway. I do think that having a competition pool provided by the city of Coralville helps us avoid the expense in any time frame of building separate pools at Liberty and West, or for their use in some way. So, but again, I agree with the notion that this is something we have to figure out what our options are now and how to proceed. And I should also say, I think I'm not going to see our options until PFM finishes their work on our financial situations.
This might be a question for Kurt. The $14 million, was that for like 2 different competition pools or multiple lanes of competition pools at the new natatorium?
So there's 3 technical pools at that natatorium planned right now. So there's the fun pool is what I'll call it. I don't know if there's a more specific term. There's a leisure pool, which would be more for amateur lap swimmers than the competition pool. And so I think the original thought was that the 2 teams could practice simultaneously in separate pools. But the competition pool has all those things that you would expect, right? Elevated seating, locker rooms associated with it, a larger deck area to accommodate teams and some of those things. And so ultimately, if we're not contributing, the city in and of itself has no need for that bleacher seating and those things. It's just not a need they would have for any of their own uses. And we were contributing, and Deputy Superintendent Ramey might have to help me out here. I think it was 90% of the competition pool and like 15% of the lap pool, just based on the usage anticipated.
So there's not like a competition pool option that's less than 14 million, like a 7 million. And again, it's really premature because I agree, but I'm just trying to wrap my head around.
We didn't necessarily explore that option when they were doing their preliminary design work. It was this idea of the fun pool, the leisure lap pool, and then the competition pool that really the city of Coralville doesn't need for a competition pool without the partnership with the district. Could they have gone with 1 basin of water instead of 2? I think there were some early designs that looked at that. What the price tag on that was, Director Williams, I don't know, but it's like Kurt talked about, they're moving forward with the design process. But then that goes back to just reworking the timeshare. What's the 2080 look like? So I wouldn't say no, there's not an option to that. It just, if that was discussed, it was discussed very, very early on in the process.
I mean, I guess I'll say, like, I don't want to end swimming at West and Liberty. I don't think we know how much, if any, we have to spend on the pool. Coralville continues to move forward with their design, and they're making decisions, and my concern is that there might be a world in which maybe we can go back to them, and instead of these leisure and competition pool, the competition pool also is a leisure pool, and maybe we don't have to contribute 90% of it, because at other times, especially not during swim season, right? Like the community could use that pool to do lap swim and swim lessons and all that. So I don't want us to lose the opportunity to find a less expensive solution that keeps swimming alive at our schools. But I also don't know how we do that, because we don't know how much money we have. I mean, that's like, so if anybody up here has a great idea to how to solve that problem, like, can you talk now?
Well, I think part of me is thinking about the resolution you guys just talked about, and if you move forward on that, and, you know, I want to respect what Director Lingo said about, you know, making sure we're being open and transparent with people, but, you know, how much freedom does the board want to provide to us to talk to Coralville? You know, it talks about no negotiations or commitments, like for us to pursue different alternate strategies, whether that's funding or whether that's size and scope. I feel like if there's openness to that, we have a better chance to bring you, you know, some type of solution that fits in with probably other priorities and plans when we get to June. If we just sit on this, it feels like, you know, potentially we also maybe miss a few weeks of opportunity to talk to them before we can bring you back to see if there is any adjustments, if there's any opportunity to look at how that's funded through a 28E that is maybe more amenable to the district's current condition than it would be in a traditional standpoint. So we don't want to do anything out of order with any direction you provide us. I mean, I've offered them, happy to communicate something different to Coralville than what I shared with you at the beginning, but I also want to respect, if you're going to entertain this resolution about you don't want any other negotiations or commitments, then we don't want to do something out of order either. So maybe that's some of the conversation, is how much, you know, do you want us doing or not doing in collaboration with them?
In the background of all this, in my mind, is that we just tried to get a $25 million anticipatory warrant. We were told no. And to mitigate financial risk. And like, even I want to know if a 28E agreement saying that we're already guaranteeing money out increases financial risk if we need to ask for 10 million in September, right? Because we're telling people that we're going to spend money that we may need in the future. I mean, that's the way you go in for a car loan, you go in for a home loan, they want to see what other loans you want and what other credit lines you've taken out. And if we are taking out other credit lines, be able to do this, that hops in the back of my mind too. It's trying to mitigate risk so we don't get into a situation where we can't secure what we need. Anyway.
And I don't think we would take action on any of those things, obviously, without you guys talking about it. I just think it would serve us well at this point to understand all of our options, right? I think that's probably the thing we want to be aware of. Like, is there, you know, if there's some hesitancy knowing what our original commitment was to saying, hey, we're not sure we're going to be able to do that, we can kind of make that read on that now. It would probably serve us better to go have that conversation sooner rather than later with Coralville. I think what Director Lingo is talking about trying to balance the risk with, you know, whatever funding we would need to do something like that's an important one to consider, right? But the more time we lose, I think, on just not understanding our full probably menu of options with Coralville, you know, we're going to have fewer choices to make on that. So that'd be the only thing I'd ask you to consider, is there's an opportunity for us to do that over the course of the next few weeks to maybe understand that and present something back to you from a choice perspective.
I think part of that conversation needs to also, we need to prioritize, and part of that conversation needs to be going back to the swim program to see if they really do want to separate, because maybe that would make a difference. You know, the natatorium project already was modified because the original ask was 17 million, and they modified the project by making the lap swimming pool more shallow, right? And that's how they saved the $3 million, and having just the one large competition pool, which was 10 lanes so that 2 swim teams could swim at the same time. Now, do you recall that?
Yeah, no, I'm following you.
Yeah,
Yep.
you made a look, so I just wondered.
Nope. I got you.
So I know that it is the goal to have 2 separate swim teams, but if we just simply don't have the money for it, do we go back to the drawing board and talk with our swim teams and see if they really, because I'm hearing from the community that they actually don't want to separate. So I just don't know. Maybe that is a conversation that we need to have, because if we kept it as one swim team, maybe that competition pool doesn't need to be 10 lanes. Maybe it's smaller, and maybe we save more money. I'm just, you're
I think
saying,
that makes sense,
how do
Director Finch.
how
I
do we
mean,
troubleshoot this?
Yeah.
And so I think those conversations need to happen.
And that was the point I was trying to get to, probably ineloquently, but like, can we make a cheaper, smaller competition? Because of the order of preference, right? I would much rather keep Liberty and West as one swim team and allow them to have a swim team, right?
Right.
Than to say,
Absolutely.
no one gets to swim.
No one wants to eliminate their swim teams.
I think
No
it
one
just
wants
goes
to.
to understanding all the options, and that's
Yeah.
kind of why you
That's what I
kind
was
of
like-
followed up with that point, is like, if that's an option, does that change, what the need is there, and then does that allow us to rethink that? So, I think we all understand the reason we got to the idea of 2 swim teams. I mean, I would also just say, for, again, your working knowledge, right, the City High folks were not happy about the joint swim team either, from a competitive advantage standpoint. So just some of those historical pieces about why we landed on 2 different swim teams. But if that's even something we need to revisit, because it affects what we're able to do on a facility end, again, the more options we have open to us, probably the better solution we can work towards.
And I would agree that we need to know all the options without committing to any of them before they're presented back to us, to have a conversation of, this is what Coralville and the swim teams, like, these are some of the options that we can look at for both.
Nobody's committed anything.
No,
new to
I'm just
Coralville.
saying,
Yep.
that's
Yep.
part of getting the options.
I remember going through the process. I think I was there when they were doing some of the planning. There's a lot of bells and whistles in their plan too, that, I don't know if we really need them all. I mean, I don't know if that's something they'd be willing to discuss.
I'm in agreement with the desire to get the options, and I think the sooner we can do that, the better. And one of the reasons I think that is that just looking real big picture and real long term at continuing diminished levels of funding, we are going to need to do more and not less of this type of partnership. And I would really hate to unnecessarily take action that, or unnecessarily or inadvertently chip away at other entities' willingness to do projects with us, because we are, the only way we're going to have so many things in the future is through partnerships. And so that does not mean that I think we should just go ahead and spend the money. But I do want to, in good faith, just find out what the options are, so that we can not, cause somebody else's plans to have to completely stop, without working in good faith with them.
So I guess takeaway, I'll try to summarize. So I think the takeaway is to understand all the options. I mean, I know from this conversation tonight, we'll need to do some quick follow-up with the city of Coralville and just kind of debrief with them, and that we would obviously like to understand, all options as we're trying to, again, and they've been very respectful of the space to try to figure out what we know here over the next several weeks. So we'll do that follow-up and come back with a conversation.
Anything else with item number 7? All right, that takes us to the the last discussion item, administrative compensation, and Superintendent Degner, is that still you?
Yeah, it's still me, and I'll just be really brief on this one. It was a part of our budget reduction strategies that we had voted on in March, and we just hadn't revisited this one, somewhat linked to Director Finch's question earlier about the org structure. We don't have that tonight, but just wanted to provide an update that, again, a reminder that all cabinet level or central office level administrators had taken a pay freeze, and then also have agreed to a voluntary reduction of 50% of their fringe benefits for the next year to help address their budget situation. That was able to generate up to $100,000 in savings for the district, which we know is significant as we look at trying to staff our classrooms and our schools next year. And so I just wanted to share, kind of close the loop on that point, that those were some elements that we did follow up on and just hadn't come back to provide an update yet to the public in that regard. So any questions on that, I'd be happy to answer, but that was really the summary for that item tonight.
But that comes back for like an official vote, that will that be listed out on what those cuts look like per person or per position? I don't know.
If that's something you guys want, we can quantify, some of the data on that, but at this point, it wouldn't be anything that would require a vote. You've already taken action on the budget reductions. We would just be working with our staff here on making sure that gets processed appropriately in HR.
Okay.
I just want to commend the administrators on taking that voluntary concession. It shows a level of leadership and shared sacrifice that is really important to rebuilding trust with our community. So I appreciate it.
Anything else from directors? All right, that takes us to the action item portion of our agenda. First up is the 700 policies.
Motion to table.
Second.
Board Secretary Coven, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you. Next up is our proposed certified budget and tax certification. Chief Operating Officer Pratt is going to make his way to the podium because he'll have a short presentation for us.
Yes. I'll just give a little opening. Mackenzie's been hanging out there in the audience, but I just wanted to thank Greater Iowa City for some of their engagement through this with some of the commercial property owners in the community and their advocacy around some of the tax rate. And so, as you can tell from the presentation, we're bringing back a lower tax rate than what we had originally published as the maximum tax rate. So again, thank you to Greater Iowa City and Mackenzie for some of their advocacy, also for other people reaching out and asking questions. I think there's a lot of education that happened this time around the tax rate, which is good. So better understanding, I think, of the community this time too about our school tax rate, and also some frustrations that continue on our end with the required sheet that the county puts out that doesn't necessarily reflect the accurate increase in our tax rate. So with that, Kurt's going to walk you through this. A lot of this should seem familiar, but there is obviously some adjustments we're presenting to you tonight.
Just to note, Matt, the county has to do the publication that they do because of state requirements.
Right.
It's not the.
Yeah, it's not their requirement. Thank you.
It's not a vote of the supervisors doing that.
Yep, so Superintendent Degner kind of cut to the chase there, and I'll do the same. So we're recommending a property tax rate of 1671 will be I'll round up for that, 1670,855. Key components of that are the management fund levy at $10 million. The previous levy we had shown you had that just under 12.5 million, so we lowered that by 2.5 million. So that's kind of what comprises a significant amount of the decrease. Otherwise, cash reserve levy, physical plant or PEPL, and debt service, those are the same from what we've talked about previously. No changes on those. The document that Director Eastham and Superintendent Dyer were just referring to did show a 1710. Just after that was published was when the state voted to approve SSA, which took budget guarantee off of property tax and onto the state. So that lowered our max technically to a 1706. And then the adjustments we've made is what makes it to the 1670. So this is just what our property tax rate has been historically for the past 4 years prior to this. So last year we were at 1610. Important to note, we will be under the FY25 kind of high water mark on the graph if you look at that here on the next slide. So we are lower than we have been previously. One of the questions the last time I talked about it was the management fund, what the anticipated costs were. So I showed each year historically kind of broken out by category what our costs have been, and you can see we kind of just carried most things across. One of the things when we were initially discussing the certified budget, initially we kind of had still the opportunity to expand or modify early retirement. And so that was part of why we had $12 million in that initial, because not knowing where we might land with that. Now that that's finalized and over with, we can project that with a lot more certainty. And so you can see we project expenses of just under $8.7 million, and that's why we're recommending a $10 million levy on that. We still don't have our insurance renewal. We get that in May typically, so you kind of take a little bit of a risk, but I'm very confident that $1 million is well within the reason to get to that. And our rates have stayed relatively consistent overall. So any questions on this so far? Hearing none, moving on. So this was just a table to show if we were to modify what we were levying in the management fund, what that would do to the property tax rate overall. And then you can see what our recommendation was there in the middle. And then this is our comparison to other districts in several different categories in FY26. Remember, we're setting FY27, so this is not within the same year. So we're proposing a 1670. You can see what the other schools in Johnson County were. I did spy on our neighbors at Clear Creek and Manad. They passed theirs at 1697, so we're still under them, which we think is terrific. Linmar, you can see another local one there in the bottom of the state top 10 there at 1799. So us at 1670, we are lower than what some of our counterparts are overall. Any questions on any of that so far?
I'm not sure where to put this question. But I'm looking at the notice of public hearing financial report page, and I'm looking at line 40 on that document, which shows the ending fund balance for the last for fiscal years 25, re-estimated 26, and the budgeted amount for 27. And my question is, Kurt, are you confident that those ending fund balances are accurate?
So that's a great question, Director Eastham. As part of the certified budget process, we have to re-estimate what our expenses and revenues are for this current year. And it is just that, it's an estimation. I mean, obviously we've still got months left here in the fiscal year. And so they are our best effort at getting those up to date, but I couldn't say for sure, like, this is where we're definitely gonna end up, obviously.
Okay, but the way I read that is that for the 3 fiscal years encompassed in this table, our ending fund balance was above $39 million.
And I believe that is all funds,
Yes,
not just the general fund. That is
yes,
all
right,
funds.
Right. Yeah, that's the purpose of that particular row, is to show the total money available to the district or used in the district.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Kurt. I was very pleased to see that you were able to bring the management fund down and bring the total tax rate down. And you know, it's good to see the comparisons. I'm glad to see that we're not the top. I do want to acknowledge that you know, the Iowa City area has probably the highest property values of anywhere in the state.
Sure.
So, you know, while our tax rate might be lower than some of these others, you know, the total tax burden is still higher. And so I do want to acknowledge that and, you know, encourage us to continue to be sensitive to that. But thank you very much for your presentation.
Quick question. So this is the proposed property tax rate for both residential and commercial, or is it different for commercial?
It is our property tax rate. The difference comes more at the county level and the state level in terms of how those two groups are taxed.
Okay.
And one of the requests you had made at the last presentation that I don't want you to think I forgot about was, what does this do to the average homeowner?
That's what's my next question.
Unfortunately, as our legislators are still debating property tax reform, that is incredibly difficult to put out there because of what they're still debating, unfortunately.
But based on what the current laws are, I mean, I know they're debating that it could change. How could the average homeowner go out and figure this out, like simple terms? Because that letter that we get makes no sense.
Yeah, so in most basic terms, let's say it's a $300,000 home. The rollback, I think, was in the neighborhood of 45%. So immediately you take that $300,000, you take off your homestead credit if you apply for that or get that. So that then lowers what your assessed value is. You take that times the rollback, which again was in the neighborhood of 45%. So that's your taxed, what you calculate your taxes on. So this $1,678.55 is per $1,000. So if you have $150,000 taxed value, you take 150 times $1,678.55. Very basic. That's going to get you plus or minus a couple $100 of what your taxes would be. Because again, there's rollbacks, there are exemptions. You apply for the military credit. Like there's a lot to it, but that's a very basic, high level. This is what it would be. Or you take last year's tax bill of what you paid for the school line and multiply it by the percent increase of ours.
That's probably the easiest,
and
simplest.
3.7%. So there's.
Okay.
Thanks for the presentation, Kurt. No questions for you. I know it's amazing. Superintendent already mentioned this, but I did also just want to mention Mackenzie and Greater Iowa City and their advocacy around this. I was able to have some really good conversations with some of our local business leaders because of the work that you were doing. And I think it's important for everybody to know that originally our local businesses were looking at what amounted to an 18% increase on their taxes. And that's, that's tough. If small business or big business, like it does 18%. And it was funny because those conversations were taking place, my conversations were taking place, and I came home and then I got my mortgage statement in the mail. And so I looked at how much I was paying in property tax each month, and I imagined if that went up by 18%. And it's a lot of money. It's a lot of money to anybody. Yeah. So thank you for your work. And then I'm glad that we were able, with our financial picture, to come off of that number. It's still an increase, and everyone always feels an increase, so I'm not pretending that it's not going to be tough. But I think I can say we're in a better situation than we were a couple weeks ago. So thanks for the work on that.
Is the increase to the cash levy the same? Or cash reserve levy?
Yeah, that remained unchanged
From
the last time we talked about it.
And what was that?
In terms of the amount or the total?
Just like whatever the point, whatever the amount of cents that it would be, like cents on a dollar. Do you remember?
Oh, you're gonna make me do some backwards math here.
Sorry.
So, so it looks like about 13 cents generates $1 million. So 30 times 13.
Okay.
I don't see anybody's phones out, and I'm not doing that in my head, unfortunately. So
30 times 13 cents.
Yep, would give you what the cash reserve levy is.
I'll do it quick for you. So 3.9 is what I got. Okay. Thank you.
Any additional comments or questions? Thank you.
Yes.
I would entertain a motion for the proposed certified budget and tax certification.
I move to approve the certified budget and tax certification.
Second.
Board Secretary Coven, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next action item is on the resolution authorize the conveyance of real property lot Press Citizen Edition to Iowa City, locally known as 1725 North Dodge Street, Iowa City, Iowa, or the ESC. Are there any questions or comments related to that? Hearing none, is there a motion?
I would recommend approval of the resolution authorizing proposed conveyance of real property to the city of Iowa City, Iowa, as presented.
Seconded.
Board Secretary Coven, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you. That takes us to our legislative updates, and our legislators are still hard at work beyond the end of session date. Superintendent Degner, did you want to highlight some items?
Yeah, I don't have much this evening. I think as we heard from our legislators on Friday when we did our forum, that a lot of the big issues that they'd set out to tackle this session still were unresolved. In needing to reach some type of resolution. Kurt just mentioned one, namely with property tax reform and what's going to happen with that one. There's some impact bills definitely for us to work on throughout the summer. One that has caught a lot of attention is obviously the behavior bill. That'll be an impact point for us as we work out trying to educate our staff and implement the work that way. So probably better once we have a follow-up presentation here over the summer as we approach the fall, just for you guys to understand the points of legislation that will impact us moving forward here. So I don't really have a lot to expand on tonight that way. Some of the unfunded mandates were pieces that did get removed from bills, which was some effective advocacy actions that folks were able to take. So if there's a success story there, that's probably the success story, is that some of those unfunded mandates got removed.
The MAHA bill that passed did have some increased PE stuff, but is that going to require more hiring of FTE for our physical education?
No, that was the good part that got pulled out. That could have cost us up to $1 million just for elementary PE staff, and that minutes requirement got removed.
I think there is just increase in physical activity minutes, but those can be met through.
Just not through PE. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
More resources.
Oh.
Kids are going to be happy.
Exactly.
Anything else directors wanted to add?
Lunch,
Okay, that takes us to agenda setting, and first up is on the 12th, there will be an operations meeting. I guess that's the first operations meeting of this year that we'll have to elect the chair. What's the discussion item? Do we have that?
Well, I'm wondering actually if we could suggest an exempt session on for the 12th. We would hope to have some negotiations done by that point, and so it would be nice to maybe be able to provide the summary to the board at that point and do that at 5 instead of operations. The other thought would be, I don't know that we would have ready to have turned around, but a financial oversight committee to look at the charter again. I think we'll be more probably ready for the exempt session because we need to obviously keep moving on negotiations. So that would be our suggestion instead of operations ahead of the meeting, Rutina.
So exempt session at 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
Are directors okay with that? All right.
Yeah, I've let board leadership know I am in Denver for work for my job that pays me money, and I am boarding a plane at 7:30 on May 12th. So I will not be at the regular board meeting. I don't think I can call in, Kim, just because of the plane. But if we have an exempt at 5, that's 4 Denver time, and I should be able to call in for exempt. And maybe I'll just call in for the beginning of the board meeting, and then when I stop responding, you'll know I had to drop off.
Yeah. All right. So then that takes us to our board meeting on the same night. Normal items are listed, but Superintendent Degner, I made a note that maybe you'll have the org chart you'll be able to bring back.
Yeah, I got a list of stuff. if you want me
Okay,
to-
go ahead.
I think we'll have sorry, I didn't pull up the draft to see what's already listed, but just the things I'm thinking about. Budget amendment, Q3 financial report, admin reorg that you just mentioned. We want to provide you an update on BASP when we went out for an RFP. We'll have the updated SBRC exhibits. And then we should have, at this time, 2 different resolutions, a resolution for the interfund loan from general fund to save for the bond payment, and then also a resolution on moving the funds from the sale of the 2 properties to the general fund. We'd like to have that ready for you on the 12th as well. PFM will be back in regards to the item on the interfund loan. We'd also like to request a closed for land after the regular meeting. I think those are all the things on my list.
Do you think you'll have an update from Coralville or have any information to share?
Potentially. We could
Okay.
put that in the draft. I mean, I know we'll go back and communicate something this week after this conversation. So even if it's not substantive, we can just share that, we did touch base with them and followed up.
Matt, we'll have the personal device survey.
Oh, yeah.
Results from staff and
thank you.
families.
One parking lot, if you could add, is because it kind of came from idea of listening to the reporting for staff and teachers, is an overview of an investigation process
Sure.
and kind of when you handle them, things to include are when you handle them in-house versus when you seek outside help, and just how that whole process works.
You said you're okay with that for the parking lot?
Yeah, it's parking lot.
Okay.
And then the other parking lot item is just coming back in a month about the reporting tool. We had talked about giving
The results,
update.
initial
Yeah,
results.
just to update, just to check in on volume.
Yeah, is it manageable?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
Anything else? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, meeting is adjourned, but we do have closed sessions, so let's take a quick break.
Yeah. Yeah.